Good evening, everybody. It's 6 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to the January 25th, 2024 Public Safety Funding Learning and Listening Session. This is a special meeting of the Grants Pass City Council, just dedicated to one topic here, to learn more and to help the community learn more about what's been going on with our public safety funding and some of the options that the council has been considering. We have been talking about this very frequently over at least the last 3 years that I've been mayor, and I know that this has been an ongoing conversation in the community for many, many years. So with that, let's get started with our city managers going to be presenting some information and outlining the format of tonight's agenda. Take it away, Aaron.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council, staff, members of the public. I first want to thank Council for taking a leadership role in wanting to have a learning and listening session so you can hear from your constituents and we can share information with regards to public safety funding. So my name is Aaron Kubik. I'm the city manager, and just to take care of a couple of first house cleaning things, housekeeping ideas, we have restrooms right behind here to the right if you need to use those. If you've got a cell phone, if you could please silence it or turn it off so it won't ring during the presentation, that'd be great. Also in the back of the room, there are some pink 3x5 cards. Those are cards for questions and answers that will happen later on in the presentation. And there's pins back there also. So feel free to get up and take some of those cards. If you have a question throughout this presentation, you can go ahead and write that question down and provide your questions to Karen Firk, our city recorder, on the back corner there. She will categorize those and bring those up to me so we can facilitate the question and answer aspect. One thing with the question and answers, we did receive a number of questions in advance of today's forum. We have categorized those, put those together, and we'll start with those first. So maybe that you want to hold off on your questions because the question might have already been asked and we're going to go through those tonight. But we will continue with questions until all of your questions have been answered before we move on to the final aspect of the meeting. So the agenda today is we're going to just provide some background on why we're here today. Why are we talking about public safety funding and what does that mean to you? What does it mean to the organization? We'll discuss the issue. You'll hear from Chief Hensman with regards to police, Chief DeLong with regards to fire. We'll discuss our previous efforts on how we've addressed public safety funding. We'll discuss our funding need, funding options that have been discussed at the council level. What is council focusing on after we have looked at all of our funding options? Provide an opportunity for questions and answers so we can learn from each other. And then in the end, we'll conclude with what does council need to know after we've shared all of this information, where you'll have an opportunity to provide some public comment to council with regards to moving forward in the future. So I'm going to start off just with the issue. What is the issue, why we're here? We're here because there is an issue with funding when it comes to public safety. It's a relatively simple issue. The issue is that expenditures are outpacing the revenue that's coming in. And that's what this first graph highlights. Expenditures are in the orange, and the revenues are those bars associated with that. And the primary revenues that public safety receives comes from the permanent property tax rate, the local option levy, and some small amount of some other public safety revenues that we receive. There has been a gap, and how has that gap been filled? This is a great graph that I think really defines it even more. Picture each one of these pie charts as just a picture in time, starting out back in 2012. So in 2012, public safety was funded by three main categories. 65% of the funding for public safety came from our permanent property taxes. All of your permanent property taxes goes to public safety. Above and beyond that, we've been operating for over a decade with a public safety levy. Over the past 10 years, that public safety levy has been at $1.79. That represents 26% of the budget. And then there's other miscellaneous revenues that come in that help support public safety at less than 10%. Back in 2012 and 2013, we were looking out the front window of that car and we were seeing that at some point in our history, in their future history, around 2015, 2017, there may be a discrepancy of revenue and expenditures when it comes to operations of public safety. And we started to have discussions at a policy level on how to address that potential future need. In 2017, that need hit, where you see a very small little slice of a pie, it's red, that's 1%. That's where the general fund needed to step in and start helping public safety stay whole. We recognized again that expenditures were outpacing revenues that we were receiving, and in 2021, that thin little slice of general fund got bigger and grew to 4%. In 2023, that slice of the pie is now up to 14%, and in 2024, it's grown to 17%. What is causing that general fund to need to continue to support that? There are three main reasons, but one of the things that's important to note is the general fund is at a place where it can't continue to support that large of a slice of pie. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. There's three main things that really have caused the discrepancy between the revenue coming in and the expenditures. One is inflation that we've talked about, and all of us have experienced inflation in some form or fashion. Inflation the last 2 years has been 8.03% and 4.73%. The issue with the inflation versus the revenue coming in is we're based on Oregon property taxes. That's where we get the majority of our revenues for public safety. Back in the mid-90s, Measure 5 and Measure 50 came in and limited property tax growth in the state of Oregon to 3% each year. So anytime there is an increase in inflation that's over 3%, it creates more necessity of general fund to help support that public safety department. And that's been happening throughout the years. The levy, we've had a levy that's helped support public safety at $1.79, and that's been the same $1.79 since 2010. So the current property tax system in the state of Oregon is one of the reasons that has created this gap. Inflation is another reason that's created this gap. And then the third is cost of services due to PERS and other items. PERS being the number one item that has created an issue when it comes to personnel costs that has far exceeded any type of revenue coming in. Besides the revenue aspect, just like your household, if you've got more money going out than you've got coming in, you have an issue. And that's what we have right now with the City of Grants Pass. That's why City Council is trying to address this. And we're looking at all sorts of options. You'll hear more about the options when our finance director comes up and talks about what we've looked at. But besides just the hard numbers, there's another piece of it that I think is extremely important, and that's the personnel and the personal aspect of it. The organizational efficiency, the organization morale aspect of it. As city manager, I can tell you I've talked with, I've listened, I've seen in the eyes of my colleagues, we're tired. We have operations that have been operating under the same FTE or with a reduced FTE over a 10-year period, and it's causing a lot of strain on our public safety departments, both police, fire, and also 911 dispatch. Our increased workload has created additional stress. We have mandatory callbacks where people are scheduled for vacation. They're on vacation. And because of our staffing levels, they have to stop their vacation and come back and work in order to maintain a certain level of service for our community. We've seen an increase in overtime. Mental and physical health of our colleagues is becoming a major concern for us. And then there's other things that are creating additional costs for us in the future, like Paid Leave Oregon, and recruitment and retention, and employee morale is extremely important. And then also time to onboard new hires. Whenever we lose either a firefighter or a police officer, it's months before they're ready to go. Sometimes it's over a year before they're ready to go. So it's extremely important for us to make sure we have good succession planning, we have the ability to recruit and retain quality colleagues. With that, I'd like to pause and bring up Chief Hintzman to talk a little bit about the police services that we currently provide to you. Chief?
Good evening, Mayor and Council and colleagues and community. And it's a little different for me looking out this way tonight. But I wanted to start off, before I go into, I have a couple of slides to share with everybody tonight. I wanted to start off by saying how much we, the police department, feel your support. We know we're supported, we feel it, we see it, we live it every single day. And we couldn't do this without you, because this is one great big team, Grants Pass. And I will share with you that the men and women of this organization are passionate about what they do. They have a servant leader's heart, and they lead with courage. And courage looks different from hour to hour, day to day. And I ask a lot of the men and women of the Grants Pass Police Department. But today I'm going to go over just some of the things that you may not know that your police department has, things that we do, and the level of service that you receive every single day, 24/7. And before I go into this, I'll also share and just remind everybody, in my opinion as the police chief, and I've been here now for 5 years, I feel like we're on a bit of an island. The Grants Pass Police Department sincerely only have the Grants Pass Police Department to rely on one another, especially at 3 o'clock in the morning when we're the only law enforcement agency working in Josephine County. So our colleagues at the OSP aren't on, they're not available, and we all know what's going on with our Josephine County Sheriff's Office. But I'm hopeful and excited about some of the advancements and change that we're going to see on the county level, so we can be more collaborative and supportive 24/7. But our team willingly do this. They're happy to do this. And then I will just share with you, it's right behind me, those resources that we have 24/7, 365 days a year. But a lot of it is being impacted, much like the city manager mentioned, and it has a lot to do with staffing concerns. And we have lots of different staffing concerns, and I'm going to give you just some information at the very end, just to kind of give you a bit of a picture so you can help paint that image in your mind as well. But we have obviously a patrol staff, we have a K-9 team, a traffic team, school resource officers, and school marshals. For an agency with currently 56 police officers assigned, we don't have 56 cops working right now, we just don't. It's amazing that we provide these services, and we will continue to do that because we're committed to this Grants Pass team, this community, we're committed. Our community response team, and I see some friendly faces in the crowd, you know what I'm talking about. Our CRT, community response team, it's a dedicated group of 3 police officers, and all they do is manage livability issues within our community, specifically in the parks. When I manage resources, and I had a delicate conversation today with my executive team, we're going to have to do some shuffling because we're in the process of hiring, losing, retaining staff for a lot of different reasons. So I have to manage those resources. And I know how important it is to you and everybody else in the community to maintain some sort of semblance within our parks, within our central business district, within our community. But this community response team are also backed up regularly by our patrol team. I see one of our sergeants in here tonight. He'll be working all night. And my guess, when it quietens down, they'll be in the park system, they'll be in the alleyways, they'll be trying their best to thwart crime before it happens. But our numbers are small right now, we're thin, and we absolutely cannot be everywhere. We'll talk about calls for service. On average, we answer about 54,000 to about 60,000 calls for service per year. And that's a mix of calls from you all, but also proactive calls from our police officers. And I expect our police officers to be out there conducting proactivity within their call volume, within their beat, meaning contacting people, stopping cars, speeders, etc., suspicious behavior, etc. That's what you want us to do, and that's what we need to do. Unfortunately, right now, because of our service levels, that's becoming harder and harder to do. Our teams right now average about 9 arrests a day. I'll read some more numbers later on through this, but when you think about it, when you have about 6 police officers working a patrol team, and they're arresting 9 people a day, it's a big number. A lot of paperwork goes with that. Investigations take a lot of time. Because we have an authority to take somebody's rights away, so by golly, we better be doing it correctly. We do not look at our responsibility lightly, so it has to be done right all the time. And then another part of it that we forget about is there's an awful lot of paperwork that goes along with it. So I look at my team and I look at Sergeant Williams in the back, and we just need to get it done. But we have to be really cautious on burning out our men and women, because we don't want to lose them to other organizations that are pretty full and have robust staffing and or a different level of crime in their communities. Investigation speaks for itself. If you've been paying attention to the news over the last 6 months, you've seen that we're incredibly busy. In 2023 alone, we were involved in not 1, but 2 officer-involved shootings. It's my 5th officer-involved shooting since I've been here, and I've only been here since 2019. Frightening numbers. I'll throw out some numbers at the end, and then I'm sure when dialogue happens later on, we'll discuss it some more. Overall, call volume has actually gone down. Crime, should I say, has gone down. We actually lost our crime analyst due to some budget cuts. So when I pulled some numbers, I have to rely upon myself to pull some of these numbers. So when I pulled numbers and noticed that there's a decrease in crime type in our community, I had to look a little bit deeper and compare and contrast certain crimes, and then ask myself, is it because we're not going? Is it because we're not proactively patrolling? For example, I looked at DUI, drunk driving. Our drunk driving numbers are lower than they were last year. And I know that if we had more staff, they would be much higher. That's just one example. Homicide rates are higher, simple assaults are higher, disorderly conducts are higher. And I can share all these numbers with you all later. But there's also good news. Some crimes have gone down. And I have to double check this one, and I don't mean to minimize this, but I noticed shoplifting has gone down, and I was quite surprised. So I'm going to have to double check that. I think I noticed a chuckle. But we do get a lot of shoplifting, a lot. And there's other thefts that have gone down, and there's other thefts that have gone up. So I would dig into this continuously. But also, too, we have a robust drug mission in this community. For any of you all that possibly know me and my thoughts on enforcement, but also support to people that are suffering from a substance use disorder, you know it goes both ways. It's firm and it's fair. We're going to hold you accountable, but we're also going to get you into treatment if we can. And there were some questions that I noticed throughout the period of time that you all were given an opportunity to ask questions. There was conversation about services and why don't we. And here at the Grants Pass Police Department, we've relied upon our partners and our services for years because we don't know any different, because we're on that island and we only have each other to support. We have partnerships with Adapt Integrated Health, who we dispatch recovery mentors to overdoses. We had almost 200 overdoses in 2023. So we utilize those partnerships. We have mobile response teams with options. We have an options case manager built into the police department so we can provide follow-up, wraparound services to people that need them. Because I'm very proud of my team. We cannot be everywhere, and we certainly cannot be managing social service related calls. So we work really hard with our partners that have the training and the experience, the expertise, and we pass those calls off. We have a professional standards and accreditation team because we have to be the best we possibly can be. If a complaint comes in, it's heard. If a complaint rises to a certain level, it's investigated. We don't brush anything under the rug, anything under the carpet. We hold ourselves accountable. We have a SWAT team, a negotiations team, property evidence, our community service officers, cadets, parking enforcement. We are the 911 public safety answering point for Josephine County. The men and women that work in there are incredibly busy. This is a job I know I could not do, and I'm awfully proud of them. And they work around the clock to answer your call for service. That when you need us, they pick up the phone, take care of business, and get us rolling. And then our record specialists, we'd be lost without them. We talk about the overwhelming amount of cases. So imagine with every single case, there's an overwhelming amount of paperwork. And the professionals in our front office, our record specialists, manage a lot. I don't know exactly what the number is. It's a lot of paperwork. And then our call takers, it's something new we were able to bring on board this year. So we will now have call takers that will work alongside our 911, emergency communicators, our dispatchers, and that will help alleviate some of that stress. That is just a short snapshot, and I've probably gone over my time already with your police department. But I want to talk about 2013. We had an estimated population of about 35,000 and a call volume of about 45, 46,000. The slide's right behind me. Before my time, my former colleague did a ICMA study to see how are we doing, where are we at? Do we need more, do we need less? What can we do better at? Give us suggestions so we can be that best practice agency we say we are. And the study was conducted by this group, the International City County Management Association, and there's a Center for Police Excellence. And they came in back then and said, in 2014, Chief, at the time, you need 60 cops. So in 2022, we had an estimated population of just under 40,000 with about 56,000 calls. And effective January 1 of this year, we have 56 cops. But how did we get here? So when I arrived in 2018, we did have 58 cops, just a couple away from that 60 sweet spot, although I knew right away we needed more. But you can't, if I don't have the money, I can't bring those cops on board. So we knew we were going to continue to do more with less. And we're okay with that. We're going to give it our best. My team, they don't do anything lightly. They go all out, and they believe in giving the best service that we can to this community. But we started off with 58 police officers, 19 dispatchers, 8 record specialists, and the 5.75 CSOs you see there was basically 6. We had a CSO who was retired and he didn't need specific benefits, so he worked on a kind of a 3/4 pace for us. This man's still with us on an on-call training position and helps us out every now and again. He's still a wonderful addition. And we had a crime analyst. And the crime analyst piece is incredibly important because when I came on board here, I knew how can we provide the best service? Well, we got to know what's going on in our community. So we developed what we call an intelligence-led briefing model. It's much like CompStat that you see in bigger cities. It's essentially just bringing all the data together, bringing all the minds together, figuring out what a strategic action plan looks like and going after it. Figuring out who are our suspects, who's breaking into houses, who's breaking into cars, who's doing all these things that we don't want them doing in our community. So how do we catch them and hold them accountable? Now that I don't have a crime analyst, who is absolutely amazing, by the way, we have to fend for ourselves. So it's difficult for me to take this on, but we figure it out, we do our best, and I pulled some numbers today too. So in 2024, we have 56 police, 18 dispatchers, so we lost a dispatcher along the way. We lost a records specialist along the way, and to budget cuts, and I understand absolutely why. This is why we're here today. We're down to 4.5 CSOs, and there are community service officers. And our community service officers, they literally just take everything a police officer can't manage, from traffic control to picking up abandoned campsites and parks to traffic accidents. They're jack of all trades. They just kind of do it all. And we'd be lost without them, and we could use a lot more. And we don't have the crime analyst. So as we go through this, and I share with the city manager and the council, and I so appreciate the support from the council and the mayor and the city manager and the team. And I heard the city manager mention he looks into the eyes of his colleagues, and he probably is talking about me sometimes, because I feel tired. And I feel like I'm wearing the weight of the organization, because I know the men and women out there are wrecked, because we ask them to come back to work when they've already worked 4 straight 12s. And then kind of we don't ask, we just kind of tell. We have a force hire list. It's a recall roster, essentially, that says when we don't have our minimum staffing, we ring you and we ask you to come to work. The folks know that it's an expectation, and we work with them when they can't make it. But I'm confident when I say this, there's not too many cops in the Grants Pass Police Department that haven't been impacted by force hires on the regular. And I'm tiring them out big time. So then we talk about a lot of the critical incidents that we manage, and we manage a lot of critical incidents, a lot. And just think about the manpower it takes, the teamwork and effort to manage an officer-involved shooting like the one we had just back in December, where an individual shot at deputies, and you could probably read about the rest, and my guys were right there as well. And then the M Street incident that happened a couple months before that, you can probably read about that too. That's just a couple of incidents. We go to so many folks in crisis. I really worry about our team. And we have lost people to protected leave regularly. So I'm going to close out with this number, and I'm sure there will be questions along the way, and I'm happy to answer them. We provide a city manager report monthly to Mr. Kubik, and in December, the report said sworn personnel had an operational effectiveness of 74% based on the realized strength of 42 to the budgeted strength of 57. Here's the part that is just a fact of life now, because the world is changing, and especially the world of policing, where we have to look at the wellness of our police officers, our dispatchers, our record specialists, our professional staff, and everybody. 4 officers on light duty. My guys get in fights and they get hurt. 2 officers were off related to an officer-involved shooting. 6 were in training status, and 3 were in pre-employment background phase. City manager mentioned it can take a couple months to hire police officers. It takes a couple months just to hire police officers. That's barely the beginning. It takes about a year to get them hired and fully trained and get them out there operating solo, by themselves, the way we need them. When you give somebody a gun and a badge, you better make sure you train them properly. So we got to send them to the State Academy. Then we bring them back here and we put them through the paces with field training officers. And it takes a lot of time. And not everybody makes it. And that's okay, because not everybody is built to be a police officer. So I wanted to share that with everybody tonight. And I'll close by saying thank you to this community, and thank you to the mayor and council and my teammates for all the support they provide this police department. With that, I'm going to introduce Fire Chief Randy DeLong.
Thank you, Chief Hensman. Good evening, Mayor, Council, colleagues, and members of the community. And I want to reiterate, I thank you for coming out and helping us work through this and listening to where we're at and helping us go forward for the future. Next week on February 1st, I will have been here with the City of Grants Pass for 27 years in fire rescue. So I've spent some time, I've seen us grown over the years, and I can tell you and feel that I've always felt supported by our community and by the citizens of Grants Pass, and for that I thank you. A little background for Grants Pass Fire Rescue. We'll talk a little bit about our department staffing level. So our current staffing is we've got 6 admin folks, 24 line personnel, 3 prevention. Our daily suppression level is 1 battalion chief who presides at the Parkway Fire Station. That person is responsible for overseeing all shift operations, and they are the primary person that leads our larger emergencies when they come in during the day. We've got 3 lieutenants, 1 at each of the stations. Their primary role is they run the engine companies. They're really our leaders on the ground when they're showing up to the scenes. Oftentimes, especially at Hillcrest and Redwood, they're going to be there before the battalion chief. They're going to be making critical decisions that are important to the outcome of any scenario they give. And they work really hard to provide the best level of care and assistance our community can get. We've got 3 engineers assigned as well, 1 for each of the stations, and then 2 firefighters, 1 at Parkway and 1 at Hillcrest. That's if we're fully staffed. The reality is very few times are we actually fully staffed. More often than not, our staffing level is going to be the battalion chief at Parkway with a lieutenant and an engineer or firefighter there, a lieutenant at Hillcrest with an engineer or firefighter, and a lieutenant at Redwood with their engineer or firefighter. So meaning that during the day, when we get a fire that comes in and the engines come out the stations to roll down the street to the incident, you'll end up with a battalion chief and then a total of 6 additional personnel going to that. That's not a lot of folks, and I'm going to go into a little bit on why we're at where we're at, or where we need to go. So NFPA 1710 is basically the guideline for fire rescue on what we need for staffing levels and what we should do. It's our industry standard. It's what they look at to hold us accountable for. In recent years, we've had a lot of information come out from studies from the Fire Institute research, the Underwriters Laboratory, and some others really helping us learn what we've been doing. In the last 10 or 15 years, there's been more science put into the fire service than probably the 100 years before that. And we're getting so much good information out there, and now we're knowing exactly where our techniques are working, where we need to improve, and how we can do better. Our number one thing when we show up to a fire is life safety. We want to make sure that we're there. If someone is inside the house, if they're not able to get out, that we're able to go in, bring them out, and also provide the appropriate level of care for them. If we've got one person inside of a fire, we're able to do that with what we have in our mutual aid partners, although it's very difficult, and a lot of the firefighting operation is not going to happen. Beyond that, it's going to be really difficult for us to do more than one person inside. 2, 3, 4, we just don't have the staffing for that kind of operation. NFPA 1710, and what I'm going to go through here, this is not focused on a motel with hundreds of people. It's not focused on a large commercial building. This is the standard they set for a 2,000 square foot residential house. So you can see on there, very first one we've got is incident commander. That's the person that's going to show up on scene, take charge of the command. They're going to be coordinating not only the resources coming in, they're going to be asking for additional resources. In our case, they're oftentimes also still the duty officer for the city. They're doing callbacks. They're actually having to monitor other incidents as well in case they're going on, assign resources to those until that someone can come back and relieve that person. We have the apparatus operator, the engineer, the person that actually drives to and pumps and operates the apparatus. They're critical in making sure that we get water to the crews going inside, but also they're helping set up tools and pre-deploying equipment up to the front door so that the crews are ready and they can do the best job that they can. Next, we're going to go into fire control, and I'm going to talk about fire control, ventilation, and search and rescue. This is really an area where those studies have come out and really identified where things work together. So fire control is when we send the attack line inside the house and they go in to put out the fire. Now they can go in and do that, and they can add water to the fire, and they're going to make a better environment on the inside because they're going to cause it to cool down a little bit, but they're also going to cause a lot of steam. That steam is going to push the hot gases throughout the house, and it's going to make the environment much more difficult actually for not only the firefighters inside, some of the occupants, but also for the search and rescue crew. So the fire control team really is also going to be really working with ventilation. Ventilation, what we want to do is get above the fire. We want to open up the roof. We want to get the hole, and so that when the fire control hits the water on the fire, the steam goes up and out, and all those gases actually go outside and up and out of the roof. That also causes the negative pressure inside the house, which then brings fresh air inside the front doors. All of that allows for a much cooler environment for the firefighters on the inside, but also for the victim. If there's a victim on the inside, you just made a much more survivable atmosphere for someone to be able to live in. You also just made this job for search and rescue tremendously easier. You're going to give them much better visibility, and you give them a better opportunity of someone that they can actually bring out and hopefully have a survivable outcome. We have the assist, the fire control, or backup. Those are ones that the backup teams on the outside, sometimes we need additional lines on the inside. Sometimes things go wrong in that very initial get-go. And firefighters, when they typically go inside, if something goes wrong and they fall through a basement, they get trapped, they have air issues, usually happens within that first 5 to 10 minutes. And that's what that backup team is there ready to go. Not only to provide immediate rescue to them, but also then to help them once they get the fire knocked down, they can go in and help them, or if the fire is extending, they can help provide additional lines. The assistive fire control, our lines on the outside, we need people that can help us move, bring tools, bring equipment. Just going inside, there's so many 90-degree bends and everything around in people's houses. You can't just go take a hose down and make it nice and easy. You need to have that assistance out there ready to go. And last on there, you've got the RIT team. RIT teams are something that, you know, in our world, we hope we never use, but they're there for us. It's a 4-person crew that if by chance a firefighter does go into the basement or there is a collapse, that we can immediately deploy, go inside to find the firefighters, get them out. Our firefighters, when they go inside of a structure, they're wearing upwards of 50 to 70 pounds of gears with tools and equipment, SCBA. They're not something that is easy to maneuver and just bring out of a building when something happens. That's why we need 4 people in there to be able to actually work together as a team and get them out to the outside and hopefully have a successful outcome there. One thing I didn't mention there is on rescue. So when we're splitting inside people that go in or for search and rescue, we've got 2 people listed there. That works if you're on a single floor or if you can go inside the front door. If you're on a second floor and we're doing a vent and a search through a window, you need additional personnel to hold the ladder. So it is very labor intensive. And again, our focus is on the life safety part of it. That's where we're needing most of these personnel. So to get to 1710 staffing levels, we need additional personnel to do that. This isn't something that just us as the fire department has come up with. I've actually got several studies. I found one back in 2002 that its recommendation increased the engine company staffing to 4. Our most recent recommendation was in 2018 from a company called Matrix, recommending that we add 12 personnel so that we can start to meet some of these levels. Since that time, there's actually been changes to NFPA. They've added additional personnel, mainly to the RIT, recognizing that 2 people in a RIT team cannot single-handedly take 1 firefighter out by themselves. They need additional personnel to do that. So the 1710 is what we're going to use as our guideline, is what the Matrix studies use as our guideline, and that's our goal and when we want to get there. We also do recognize that we just can't do everything here. We do need to rely or utilize some of the help outside. So this isn't just all on the backs of Grants Pass to get to that level. Going and adding the 15 additional bodies only gets us part of the way there. In order to get to the 16 personnel, we are still using our mutual aid engine from Rural Metro, which will give us 1 engine with 2 personnel and a battalion chief. The other thing we're also using is off-duty chief officer callback. During the last year, we were able to identify that on our fires, we're able to get about 1.3 of our chief officers back, which is only 2 to 3 of us at any given time, to the emergency to respond on that first alarm to help out. So this is, we're utilizing everything that we can together to get to that level, with again the goal to make it safer not only for the citizens of Grants Pass, but also for our members of our community. And the last I want to just leave with is our folks are also tired. We've had a lot of turnover since the time I've been here. In fact, a little over a year ago, I was with Medford Battalion Chief, and they were commenting, I think at that point, they had 27 firefighters that had come from Grants Pass. 27 working over there that had started over here. We've had 2 that have went there since then. This has really left our current middle ranks low. What that means is my lieutenant corps, I don't have a lot of seniority that's below them. I don't have a lot of experience. And I don't have a lot of people to fill that gap. For that reason, my lieutenants are getting in a lot of forced hire overtime. And again, when I talked earlier, these are the folks that are making our critical decisions when they're showing up on scene, the ones I rely on the most when I'm at home to go out and do a good job and make smart, good decisions. They're tired, they're worn out, and they're needing help. And I'm hoping as we move forward, we're going to be able to do something to help them out. So with that, here on the approach, we're looking at a phased approach to staffing at Parkway with increasing that staffing level first, and then hopefully through the years with additional support, be able to increase Hillcrest and Redwood up to those levels as well. So with that, thank you, and again, thank you for your time coming in and supporting us tonight and helping being part of this process. I'm going to turn it over to Finance Director Rowley.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and the community members. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all for coming. It is really appreciative for you guys to come here and hopefully you take something home with you, and as well as educate some of your other community members. So part of the history here, this isn't for a lack of trying on the council's part. So back in 2008, we tried increasing the levy by 10 cents and that failed. 2015, they tried a sales tax at 2%. In 2019, they tried to introduce a fire service district, which kind of works like an option levy, but it's at a permanent rate. In 2020, they also tried to increase the public safety levy by another 10 cents, and that failed. In 2021, we had about a $2 million budget reduction. In 2022, we supported the county's 3% seasonal sales tax. And in 2023, we made about a $1.9 million budget reduction. So based on our financial estimates, this next year, because our previous 2023 budget reductions some of them were temporary in nature because we did have some retirements, and we're going to let those be vacant until the end of the year to hopefully give us some time for potential funding options. We estimate that the next year's budget is going to be about $3.3 million short. Based on the two gentlemen that came up here previously, they are asking for approximately 8 FTEs in conjunction with their services, which is another $1.5 million. So the gap potentially asking for currently right now is about $4.8 million in the general fund. Council has considered multiple funding options. There's been a payroll tax, a service district, the food and beverage tax, sales tax, utility fee, local option levy, and reduced services. And I do want to make a comment at this point too. The handout that you have today, a lot of this information is on the website, and it is that very first link at the top of the first page. So for a payroll tax, it is not voter required. The pros are employers, employees of local industry can pay for the services. The city of Eugene actually implemented a payroll tax for their local jurisdiction in 2021. And the resources can increase with increase in wages. The cons of that, they are subject to volatility and economic factors. And potentially you could deter businesses to other local jurisdictions. Currently, right now, the city of Grants Pass does not have staffing or system or collection and enforcement to take on a payroll tax. With a service district, consider it like a new permanent levy and or a new formation of a district. It is voter required. That was tried in 2019. The pros is it does establish a permanent property tax base moving forward. However, it does need to have voter support, and it is limited by the property tax growth that Mr. Kubik pointed out earlier as a 3% by Measure 5 and 50. A food and beverage tax is not voter required. Your consumers pay for the services, which does include outsiders. There are 3 current Oregon cities that we can leverage their tax code from. The cons, obviously, they are subject to volatility. As we look to our neighbors to the south in Ashland, you can look at their financial reports, and through COVID, they did see a large decrease in revenues through this tax. And again, the city right now currently is not set up as far as staffing, system, and collection and enforcement of this. So with a sales tax, it is not voter required. This has been tried once locally at the city before and then in conjunction with the county. So consumers pay for the services, which does still include outsiders. This has actually a wider base of taxable items, which does include all of the food and beverage taxable items. The cons is, again, it is subject to volatility and economic factors. We don't necessarily have the staffing, system, collection, and enforcement. And there is a bit of a timeline to implement this, as we potentially would be the first in the state to implement. A utility fee is not voter required. In 2014, actually, council did enact a transportation model utilized for the jail services utility fee to pay for the county jail system. So the pros is this is passed to those who already have city services and the logical assumption that they are using public safety. And we can include those who are property tax exempt, like nonprofits. And we already currently have similar staffing and resources in place to do that billing. The cons is it is another fee on the utility bill, and potentially we would increase the delinquencies and put that pressure on our ratepayers. With a local option levy, it is voter required. As you can see, there's kind of a history of where our local or our levy rate has been since the year 2000, and we just renewed for another 5 years at $1.789. And you can see the 2 times that the city tried increasing that, and it was voted down. So the pros for a local option levy, it has been consistent and voter approved since 2010. We currently are receiving about $7 million in property tax money due to that 179. The cons is it is temporary in practice, and it is a maximum of 5 years, and we have to go back out to the voters every term it ends. And it is subject to future property tax compression first in the event that we hit that. Another option that has been considered is a reduction in services, and we've had 2 of those recently. That is not voter required. Recent history would show we did a $2 million budget cut for fiscal year 22 in 2021, and we did another exercise recently for $1.9 million in 2023. So the pros of this obviously is there is no requirement of a new revenue and or burden on the community. The cons is we're potentially looking at reduced police, fire, parks, and admin staffing levels and the services in which we provide. So a little bit more focus, and probably why all you are here tonight. The food and beverage tax, the methodology is to be determined. A rate potentially, if we were to go down this, is to be determined. An estimated revenues is about $3.9 million a year at a 5% potential tax rate, which 5% is the same that Ashland has currently. And examples are food and beverage prepared for immediate consumption at a restaurant, grocery store, diner. And so again, with the parameters, we kind of loosely based our estimations off of the City of Ashland's code model. But that doesn't necessarily mean that our council have to go 100% with that model. Another item is a sales tax. That methodology is to be determined. Some of the estimated rates we've been talking about is about 1.5%. The estimated revenues are between $4.6 and $8.3 million per year. And that has to do with potentially some of the things that are taxable and not taxable and what you use and don't use. Some of those examples are going to be on page 2 of your handout tonight that show you the differences and nuances that could be decided. So for some of these revenue estimations, I use the 2015 criminal justice as parameters, which is loosely based on the state of Washington's code. With a cap, obviously that decreases the amount of revenue that we would collect because there would be a maximum on, or a maximum tax on the total purchase. And so with a $1,000 cap, we're looking at potentially about $4.6 million annually. And then without a cap, about 6.8. The utility fee, we've kind of settled into the transportation model, which again was previously used in 2014 for the jail services fee. The calls for safety that you hear these gentlemen talking about, we are about at a 50-50 residential to commercial call volume. And so our transportation model has about a 61% geared towards residential, which is closer than the water meter size that we considered, which is about 85% of residential would be charged. And then the per account, which would be about 91% residential. The rate in which was talked about with $12 a single family residential structure. And then there's other rates as well. The estimated on that $12 single family residential structure is about $3.3 million per year. That is on page 3. And I'll briefly go through what that $12 rate structure looks like. 80% of our accounts, approximately, are single-family residential in the city of Grants Pass. Another 10% are multifamily, which leaves the rest as commercial. Of the commercial, about 91% of the commercial accounts reside in a commercial A status. Now, what is a commercial A status? It's a little bit more complicated, and that's on page 4 of your handout. In theory, everybody could be a commercial A. Commercial A is defined as the type of business you are and the number of trips you garner for your type of business, which is based on a study, and it's based on the square footage of your business. You can also back into potentially what your charge is on the website, as there's an example on your current utility bill that gives you an example of where to find that and how you get charged and where you potentially fit into those classifications. And now here comes the fun and interesting part, and I'll probably go way too fast for everybody, but I'll try and do my best to slow down. So this will be pages 5 and 6 of your handout tonight. So on the left of each of these, and I'm going to go through this slowly again, so don't feel like I'm going to rush through this all right now. On the left side, you're going to get a tax rate and the approximate tax revenues for that tax rate. So I have a sales tax and a food and beverage that differentiate between the two and the rates in which those revenues may bring in. On the top, there's a public safety utility fee in the revenues. So the most common rate is the single family at the top because that is 80% of our accounts. And then associated right underneath that are those net general fund revenues. So by combining these revenues, you can kind of find yourself into the middle like chutes and ladders and potentially find a funding source of where we may get. The colored years at the bottom and throughout the grid in that diagonal fashion are the projected funding needs with staff recommendations for the next 5 years of added personnel. So I'm going to go over this a couple more times just so everybody can follow me. So let me get out my laser pointer here. Okay, on the page 5, we have our food and beverage tax on the left here. Here is your tax percentage, and with that potential tax percentage, the approximate food and beverage revenues, as it would be by itself. And then on the top, you have your transportation public safety utility fee methodology with your single family residential rate, the potential revenues in which that rate would garner. And by meeting in the middle, you can find a combination of two potentially to come up with the funding gap. And then these diagonal colors, and I apologize for the size on the screen, but there's numbers there, and the colors represent those out years of projected need in public safety funding staffing. And if that wasn't boring enough, I could do it one more time. So this is the same thing, just a different numeric revenue model. So on the left, we have sales tax revenues. You have your tax percentage, the potential approximate revenues for that sales tax. And at the top, same public safety utility fee methodology with a single family residential rate and those approximate revenues. You have your 5 years of the potential projected output of needing to increase FTE over those next 5 years. And with that, I will turn it back to our city manager, Aaron Kubik, for some questions and answers.
Thank you, JC. All right, we're going to move into our questions and answer session. We'll start with the questions that were submitted in advance of today's learning and listening session. And if you have questions you'd like to also add that are not covered in this, then feel free to grab a 3x5 card and write out your question and provide it to our city recorder in the back corner there. And she will bring those up as we work through this. And Mayor Council, you do have on the dais a handout that states public safety funding, learning and listening session with the date. That might be helpful for you to work through and follow along with also. Okay, so let me move into, I actually have a spreadsheet here that shows the questions. All right. All right, question number 1. How does the level of service and cost for public safety in Grants Pass compare to other cities in Oregon of like size? Might be a good question for potentially our finance director.
Yeah, and forgive me, a lot of these questions are going to be geared towards me, so I've written a lot of notes down. So I'm going to be looking down, even though I am addressing you as the public. So looking at one city's budget for police and fire and comparing with Grants Pass may not give a like-for-like comparison due to the differences in types of service and level of service defined by each community. But what you'll find out in the state is some communities have recognized the need for a higher level of service requiring an additional funding source. Our largest cost for public safety is personnel, and the city, through salary studies and collective bargaining, trying to maintain a competitive salary.
And then from that covers sort of the costs associated with it, but what about like service level? Chiefs, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, and this is a really great question for the community to kind of take in because there's no perfect answer for it. I think professional law enforcement over the years used to do things per 100,000 within cities or 1,000 within a city and kind of come up with a number, whether it be 1.5 or 2.5 police officers per 1,000 or whatever that number would look like. But it really depends on the community and what the community needs. You have to look at the population, you have to look at the service level, you have to look at the type of crime. And when I spoke earlier, we talked about the ICMA study that was done back in 2014, and they recommended 60 police officers back then. So I think as a leader within this organization, I have to look at what's appropriate for here. And it's also important to compare and contrast it to other cities, of course, to see what they're doing. You can't negate that fact. As we look to our colleagues to the south, Jackson County, they first of all have a much easier time hiring and retaining and recruiting police officers than we do here in Josephine County, just merely because of the pay. But also, too, when you compare and contrast, and I don't know off the top of my head, like Medford PD, for example, but when I compare police departments in my head in Southern Oregon, I think about the police officers here and what would be a like agency, and it would be Medford. And I think if you were to compare the citizens here, it's like 40,000, to Medford, I think it's 90,000. They have over 100 cops. I think they're looking at adding some more too, maybe into the 110 range. and we have 56 cops. I'm confident we pretty much work the exact same level of service. They have a lot of issues there. We have a lot of issues here. I've never quite done the study to see if we're working more than they are, but I can tell you, just anecdotally speaking, we've had a police officer come back to Grants Pass from the city of Portland and said we were too busy. So I think that gives you some kind of a picture on what we do here. And for those of you out there in the crowd that might know some of my background, I came from the city of Las Vegas and worked in Las Vegas for several years. And sometimes I think my guys think I'm joking with them. I feel like I'm working in Vegas when I'm here in Grants Pass. You know, Vegas is not just all the glitz and glamour in downtown. There's lots of communities there. And this feels like a substation in the city of Las Vegas. So hopefully that answered that question, but also to we go back to the study and then go back to also the amount of calls. The call volume has increased exponentially over the years, so we have to look at that and how do we actually put forth the right number of people to serve this community. Right now, we do not have enough police officers to serve this community adequately, and I think we see that based upon the crime, the call volume, and just the additional needs. But you also have to take into consideration some of the policy decisions that are made that are out of my control. I have unfunded mandates quite often. There's a short session happening soon, so we're not sure what's going to happen with ballot measure 110. House Bill 3115 has also impacted communities, and that talks about time, place, and manner restrictions for people resting or sleeping in public. So we have a lot of things that we have to negotiate and navigate, and sometimes we're not equipped for this, so we have to figure the whole thing out. But that gives you some kind of a picture of how we anticipate staffing and how we figure things out from year to year.
Yeah, on the fire side, as far as level of service goes, you know, in the time that I've been here with Grants Pass, we have significantly grown in the amount of calls and the responsibilities and things that we have taken on as local fire. One thing that's really tough to compare level of service is many of the agencies that we actually look at for size also have the ambulance service. So in addition to fire role, they have the ambulance that they're running 911 calls and doing transports to the hospitals as well. Here we don't have that, and we are extremely busy when we start looking and comparing the fact of other agencies that I know of around the area that don't necessarily have that ambulance service. We have a tiered response. We don't go on every medical call that's out there. That's another thing that makes it difficult. Some of the areas that we are looking at, they do go on every medical call, from a stub toe to a cardiac arrest. We go on what's called the critical calls, so chest pain, strokes, diabetics, those where we've determined ahead of time need more help than just what two people on an ambulance. Those calls that are going to be above the BLS level and require a higher level of care or more personnel to care for them. When it comes to the fire side, the one thing I have known is I'm looking out there and trying to figure out staffing-wise, how do we compare to other agencies? And so far, I haven't found one yet that we're comparing to two-person staffing. We're looking at agencies, you know, look over in Medford, they run similar styles of calls that we run over here in fire. They're going to four-person crews. Jackson County District 3, Klamath Falls, they're running three-person crews, and that seems to be pretty common amongst the ones that I've looked at, is they're running three-person staffing and or moving to the four-person staffing in order to do the same objective that we're looking at, is meeting that NFPA 1710. You know, it sounds like a lot, but at 2 o'clock in the morning, if you have a fire and you have a couple, say, kids that are trapped inside that house, what you have rolling in on those engines in that first 10 minutes is what's going to make the difference, not only with the rescue, but the care that you give those folks in getting them to the hospital. And I think that that's something that's important. It's not about just getting a person out of the building and onto the front yard. Our goal when we're looking at life support, whether it's a rescue from a fire or cardiac arrest, A successful win for us is when the person walks out of the hospital whole and has a functioning life as they're moving forward. So those are the levels of services we're looking at trying to go to and trying to meet, and definitely on engine company size, we seem to be below our comparables.
Thank you. Going through some of these questions, some of them are definitely operational or financial in nature, and some of them are policy in nature, so council may be also responding to some of these questions. Question number 2, why not offer the voters a permanent levy that is well thought out, appropriate for future, especially with the recent success of Josephine County? It could be potentially a policy one. Is there a council member that would like to take that answer on? Councilor Loveless?
Okay. Lovelace, just correcting. I just want to say that when we looked at what the amount would be, it was double. When we looked to get where we're at, you're talking about going from $1.70 to $3.60, and we knew that wouldn't pass. I happened to be the person who was in charge of the PAC when we went for $1.89, and we fought hard for 10 cents more. We fought hard. I mean, anytime you go out for a levy or you go out for something, you're talking $10,000, $12,000, and a whole bunch of people to kind of go out and hang door hangers and do all those sorts of things to get those things going. You get tired. And when you fought so hard for $1.89 and it was voted down, you get discouraged. And this is my 8th year on this council, we went out to try to get the water fee, the transportation fee off of the water bill and put it on a sales tax and put it on a gas tax, because we knew what was coming, because we knew we were going to need a water treatment plant. So that was the first thing we wanted to do, and that was voted down. And that's not up there, but that was voted down. So we've gone through, everything that we've tried, and it's gone 8 years, and here we are. So when I hear people say, well, gosh, all of a sudden, how did this happen? It's just like, no, this has been a process. And it started clear back in 2015, 2016. And there have been many things. And so that's basically why, is that we knew that was just, we knew what the people accepted. People accepted $1.79, and we knew we were going to have to go to another source. Another problem with the levy is the last 2 times it ran every 3 years, which means after the first year, you automatically had to start planning for the next year's, or 2 years later, levy to come up. And what that did is it's very it created a lot of instability for our police and fire. And I can tell you that in the firefighters and the police that I've talked to, it wasn't necessarily that people in Medford don't necessarily get paid more, but what they do have is they have a stable funding source for public safety, and that's what we don't have here. So that's what needs to happen, is we need to build stability into our fire and police funding. And then we will be able to recruit, we will be able to retain, and we will let those people live in the community that they work in. So that, to me, was what we really needed to do, because just patchworking a levy over and over and over again wasn't working. And I'm just going to step back a few minutes before that, because clear back, which was 27 years ago, when the levy was, when the permanent tax was established, this is something that often people who've moved to the community don't realize, that back in 1996, we were bringing in $12 million from forestry and from our forests. And that was just, the county government didn't even need any funding. That's why they were given 58 cents per thousand as a permanent rate. We were given $4.13, which is great at the time, but you can see what happened by 2012. That just didn't happen. And we know what happened to the forestry industry. We're now, what, 2 million, 3 million, maybe max, do we bring in? And that money just went away. So that's a battle that we fight that the rest of the state does not fight. And I think that's something that we also need to realize, that our average, first couple of facts through this 8 years I've learned is, number one, less than 9% of the people in Josephine County are paying the full tax rate. Less than 9%. And part of that, 74% of the land is owned by the federal government, right? And then we also have forestry exemptions, we have agriculture exemptions, we have veterans exemptions. We have a lot of exemptions and a lot of people that aren't paying the full property tax. So to put an extra $3.60 on the property tax of people puts that burden on one group of people, and that's less than 9% of the people who live in Josephine County. And that didn't seem fair either. So if you compare what we pay in taxes to the rest of the state, we, on the average in Josephine County, paid $9.56 or something. The average in the state of Oregon is $17 and I think it's 26 cents. But that's the average of the people in the state of Oregon paying property tax. We don't pay very much compared to the rest of the state. And I know people don't like taxes, but the reality of it is, number one, they have a lot more property that is taxed, and they get a higher rate. And so they're not stuck with some of the problems that we are, and that is what makes it so unfair for us to try to compete against those other people to keep fire and police. So that's my statement for the day, but that goes back to the property tax. The property tax is a limited tax. It taxes the same people over and over and over, and we have to spread the burden out, and that's kind of where we are.
So, and thank you, Councilor Lovelace. And also, with regards to levies, they are temporary in nature, and the question was trying to get to a permanent, and the city basically tried to do that a few years ago, as JC mentioned, with a fire district, which does create a permanent property tax, where levies are temporary in nature. So levies could not be a permanent solution when it comes to stabilized funding. Question number 3. Property values have certainly increased since 2018, when nearly 80% of voters first approved the first temporary levy. What has been the increase in terms of positions and capital expenditures for the police and fire departments that exceeded these funds for the base levy of $1.79 per thousand and the temporary levy? Well, that one's a big question. JC, maybe you want to take that one on?
Sure. So, yes, property taxes have increased since 2018. However, measures 5, 47, and 50 limit that tax increase. So as a maximum, it's 3% annually. Mathematically, we are behind in these last 2 years when you consider inflation at 8% and almost 5%. So your costs truly are rising faster than your revenues. We also have some other costs, like in personnel, that I'm sure you all have experienced as well, such as medical costs have gone up in the last 5 years as well. We have seen some volatility in the public safety staffing. From a budgetary basis, we have reduced some of our equipment replacement, building maintenance, and staff to help balance our budget.
Thank you. Question number 4 that was submitted. Why are we not considering other services, such as mental health specialists, that are trained to intervene with mental health emergencies and other types of community services that would free police from daily duties? I think, Chief Hensman, you sort of touched on that. You want to highlight that any further?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is a really great question because I don't think a lot of our community know what I'm about to say, and I'm really happy to share. We do think about this all the time, but the city doesn't stand up mental health services. But I believe it's my responsibility to find out ways to work with all partners within our community so we can help people and guide people into the correct services. Because we all know that people suffering from, fill in the blank when they're in crisis, a lot of times, who do you call at 2 o'clock in the morning? It's the police department. We got to come out and we got to take care of it. But we've done several things over the years to develop really robust, wonderful working relationships and partnerships with groups like Options for Southern Oregon. You may not know that we have a mobile crisis response team, and we've had a mobile crisis response team for years. We also have, and I mentioned this during my presentation, we have a case manager who is paid for by Options for Southern Oregon. However, she is embedded within the police department. A lot of police departments don't do that, but we do that, and we have a case manager built in. And this particular person, this case manager, works directly with our community response team, regularly dealing with people that are less fortunate than you and I. Also, too, I wanted to touch on our sobering center. That was the brainchild of a lot of smart people long before me, and we are, I think, one of 3 communities in Oregon that have a sobering center. This is a blessing for our community to have such a center in place, because what that does for police officers, we may come across somebody that is, let's say, out of control due to alcohol downtown, and we have other options than taking that person to jail. I would much rather take somebody that's behaving poorly because of alcohol to the sobering center and not take them to the jail, so we can avoid that criminal justice piece that's really not necessary, bogging down the system. But also too, and I think you all heard me speak to our partnership with Adapt Integrated Health. We went out and we asked, hey, can we get this partnership together? Because we know we have a problem with people overdosing in our community. We know we have a problem with people dying in our community. And frankly, we're all sick and tired of it, and we want to see what can we do to help people. We absolutely do not want to see people die in our community, but we also want to see how can we guide them into some sort of a treatment, some sort of a service. So we dispatch recovery mentors to all overdoses. In fact, I just met with one of the senior leaders from ADAPT the other day for our check-in, and that's something that your police department's been doing on a regular for years. I would love to have a CAHOOTS model system in Grants Pass, and for those of you that don't know CAHOOTS, they're up in Eugene and Springfield, and I know they get about $1 million from each city, something like that, and they have several professional mental health workers that just respond to a variety of calls for service. And it would be nice in my mind to have that available to us. But where I think sometimes the confusion sets in is when someone's in crisis, the case manager can't manage someone in crisis. That's troublesome, problematic, basically fighting. We need to deal with that first, and then a warm, a soft handoff to somebody else. So that would be my response to that question.
Thank you, Chief. Question number 5. What was the budgetary impact of splitting Grants Pass Police and Fire in 2021 and creating the need for a fire chief? How has this impacted annual costs?
You want me to answer that? No. So I know potentially out there in public, it looks like we do just add FTE and positions out there. At the time of this decision, though, when we added the fire chief, we did not fill a fire prevention specialist, and so there was an FTE trade-off there. Obviously, the fire chief is a little bit more expensive than a fire prevention person. However, in bringing the fire chief inside the city, we actually canceled our contract with the county, and the fire chief is supposed to be in charge of the city's emergency management system, which at the time of that decision, that was a $30,000 savings to the city.
Thank you, JC. Question number 6. How linked is the increased expenditures for the police to the homeless crisis? Why are we not looking at permanent funding to address the need for safe temporary housing that will meet court-ordered requirements? So there is a couple of statements in there that may need to be looked at or defined a little more, and maybe we can start with our city attorney, Augustus.
Evening, everybody. I'll leave to Chief Hensman the increased workload that this issue has probably brought upon his department. But in terms of the city being required to provide a space or shelter for homeless individuals in the city, that is actually not required by any court order. The case that we were dealing with specifically deals with very narrow issues involving the Eighth Amendment. And I think at all levels, at the district court level and at the Ninth Circuit level, the judges made it clear that the city was not required to provide shelter for its homeless community. It only stated that so long as there are not enough shelter beds, then the city would be prohibited from criminally or civilly enforcing against sleeping and resting in public places.
Thank you.
So my response to this is, as a leader in the police department, I have to manage resources, and I have to evaluate the needs of the community daily, weekly, monthly, annually. It goes without saying that we are working through some problems within our community that are unhoused, people living in parks, but also people dealing with mental health conditions and substance abuse disorders. Regardless of what anybody thinks, I have to look at community safety and livability. So we have the community response team that was initially supported by 2 police officers, and in 2023 I added a 3rd. In fact, I added a sergeant to that team. So now we have 3 police officers, and all they do is manage livability issues within our parks and then within our downtown environment as well. Also, we put quite a burden on the rest of the team as well. So not only do I want them and ask them to respond to regular calls for service, I also need them to walk the parks, do extra patrols as well within that system. Because we do have a lot of crime that happens within the park system, and we do have people that are unhoused that are victimized, and we have people that are unhoused that are suspects. And we have to manage that like anything else. And we essentially have to have our blinders on and treat everybody the exact same. And I mentioned before, we try our best to treat everybody with, and I mentioned this earlier at a meeting, but it's important to me and it's important to the team that we treat everybody with respect and dignity, no matter what. But we will be firm and we will be fair in how we do our job. So the unhoused concerns we've been dealing with has brought a lot of extra work to my department.
Thank you, Chief. Question number 7, prior to adding more taxes and costs for individuals and businesses, can we look at some red light cameras for the city of Grants Pass? I don't know if a council member would like to maybe answer that one that was around when we looked at that, or if I can we should refer that to the chief. Councilor King?
Well, it was my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, that ODOT would not allow us to do that along the state highways. And the major prospect for doing that, to where we would have the biggest problem, would be 6th and 7th Street and Redwood Avenue. And so you'd end up with cameras at a lot less busier intersections that probably don't have the traffic and the issue. That's my understanding.
Yeah, and this was a topic of conversation before I arrived, but it's my understanding too. Getting signed off by ODOT can be quite complicated.
In the red light camera system, its primary purpose is for traffic enforcement and compliance, not as a revenue stream. So it would not be a revenue stream sufficient to provide for public safety funding. Question number 8. Please explain why the City Council would not support a countywide sales tax proposal a year ago to support the Sheriff's Department, but now seems to think it is the only way to cure the problem they have in paying for public safety. Councilmember 1, Councilor King.
I'll just try to, this is through my filter, okay? So my filter, it may not be the same as your filter, but at the time, the City Council had a lot of varying opinions. Not everybody was of the same opinion. There were about 3 councilors, I think, that did support it, and everybody has a different reason for what they were talking about. I think one of the main things with some of the councilors, if you did go for a sales tax, and that's not to say that we will or will not, but if you did, under the county proposal, most of the tax would be collected in the city limits, but there would be some revenue spent outside the city limits. probably in a greater percentage than where the revenue was collected, and that would not be true of a city sales tax because all the money would stay within the city. Now, there's advantages and disadvantages to that too, because we need to be collaborating with our neighbors and be seamless between the city and the county. And I don't know if that answers the question, but if I was to put it succinctly in 10 minutes or in 10 seconds, I think there was varying opinions. You'd have to ask each one of us what they thought. There was some support and there was some opposition.
I think ultimately, council took action to support the sales tax because they did provide an opportunity for your constituents to vote. So council was supportive of that initiative in that perspective. Councilor De La Grange.
Yeah, I'll just tack on to that a little bit more. The sales tax that the county proposed was not a good deal for the city because it was based on population. So I don't remember the exact numbers, but let's say 50% of the people live in the county and 50% of the people live in the city. That's how the revenue from the sales tax would have been split. However, much more than 50% of the transactions happen in the city. You know, I mean, 75, 80% probably happen in the city. So in essence, the city would have been subsidizing the county under that particular proposal, which was not a good deal for the citizens of Grants Pass. With a city proposed sales tax, it's a little bit different because that same inequity is not there. And the sales tax, as far as the options we've been talking about, is the one that spreads the funding burden across the largest number of people. So I think that's the reason that it's still on the table at this point.
Thank you, Councilor. Question number 9, has the city considered the upfront and ongoing expenses such as this one, and I think this one is meaning a sales tax of some form or fashion, that every business would incur just to comply? Councilor Fazer.
I think the important thing is that we are making consideration for this. And I think making consideration and doing the work now to find out what those expenses are versus what kind of service can public safety provide in this community is the important step, right? The information and the consideration that council is doing right now is in essence this question. So when push comes to shove and we need to find the revenue, right? Then it comes to, is the council willing to implement a tax on the people, or is it going to go to the ballot for a tax on the people? I think that's the really important question that everybody needs to ask this council, right? So what we're doing is we're trying to understand, right, the implications of garnering new revenue sources for public safety in this community.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Pell.
Thanks, DJ. I'd just like to add to that also that, you know, there are going to be some implementation startup costs, some percentage of a tax, whether it would be a food and beverage or a restaurant tax, food and beverage or a general sales tax, would be retained by the business owners, you know, for their time and effort. But I'd like to point out, and I've been doing a lot of talking to a lot of business people lately, a lot of business owners lately, and I can cite as one small example my own business. My point of sale system is 30 years old, okay? For me to calculate sales tax and accurately is essentially about a 15-second operation to essentially click some boxes that say, now we have a tax, or these items on these departments are taxable, these items are not. So anyone that has a point of sale system that wasn't built exclusively for Oregon, because there's sales tax in virtually, you know, in many, many other states, they have a point of sale system that is essentially ready, is plug and play ready to do those calculations. There are some businesses that don't have cash registers. You can probably buy, I know that you can buy a cash register for roughly $350 or $400 that has a tax key on it. So calculating tax and implementing department by department is not a big deal. I'm not very tech savvy, and I'm confident I can do it with a 30-year-old POS system. But again, the better questions, I think, are the ones that DJ just presented.
Thank you, Counselor. All right. Next question. Question 10, has the city considered adding EV charging stations in the numerous city parking lots for a charging fee and adding solar to city buildings as cost savings, then using those savings and funds to fund the budget shortfalls? Well, since it's a budget thing, I think I'll go to JC here.
So yes, we do have some electronic vehicle charging stations. They are downtown. We currently do not charge for them per policy direction. However, if we did charge for them, that's not necessarily a large money maker, much like the red light cameras. The city is always looking for cost-saving and clean energy measures. The city is currently performing 2 feasibility studies for solar. However, the net effect of these projects is to curb future energy requirements, not necessarily to make money on them. A lot of our facilities and infrastructure, we would need mass fields in order for us to be a net zero back into the system, much like our water treatment plant and our water restoration plant.
Thank you. Question number 11. If we approved a mechanism to increase public safety funding, what improvement can we expect in crime, drug, repeat offender, and vagrancy problems here in Grants Pass? I think that's specifically a police chief question. Chief Hensman?
Yeah, and it's the million-dollar question, and of course, the revenue would support the shortfall, so that would be the first thing that I would mention. But I would also share that this is something that we do all the time, and I think we're good at it. We are good at going after bad guys. We've had some major drug busts and weapon seizures lately. That was publicized with a major long-term, sophisticated investigation with a drug trafficking organization recently that we took down. And this is a direct result of our partnerships with the DEA, the drug teams, and assigning police officers to these roles so we can get the biggest bang for our buck. So we get the full service of the federal government, local task forces, the Oregon State Police, et cetera. And we really take drug crime seriously in this town, even though ballot measure 110 was voted in by the people, and I respect that. We took a stand and we issued citation after citation, and only until recently, Multnomah County overtook Grants Pass on the amount of citations. So we held firm because our community they're concerned about people utilizing drugs in our parks and in our city, and just the impacts on the individual and the family and everything else that happens with drug use. So we worked that pretty hard. And repeat offenders, that's a tough one, because you've got to balance somebody's rights against something they may have done in the past and served their time for. So that's an interesting question. And I did want to add, when this is all over, I'm available 24/7. If you guys ever want to come and visit and talk about crime and strategy, I'm always available. But also, too, when we talk about vagrancy problems and we talk about the level of unhoused and transient and homeless people in our community, we've done a pretty good job so far with our community response team, and we bolstered that. But that's another balancing act that we have to continue to be very aware of. But also, a lot of our transient vagrancy, unhoused, homeless problems that we see, they are not high-level offenses in our community. The majority of them don't even rise to a criminal offense. So we really have to balance the governmental interest to enforcement. There was a call that came in the other day at like 8:05 or 8:15, and it was a pretty rough-looking environment in one of the parks, and my guys didn't get out there till like 10 a.m. So it was problematic for at least a couple of hours, but we got there, and that's because we're balancing things. But initially, we kind of talked about recruitment, retention, morale. And the extra funding, or the funding to support the gap that will bring in extra help, will also bring relief to the men and women that are getting called back on the regular. We have folks that still take vacation, still go on family medical leave, still get into incidents, still get into, light duty. So there's a lot of managing of personnel that we have to do, and this will certainly help us. In fact, I think we really need to look toward overhiring, because there are always so many people that are unavailable for a variety of different reasons. We have to make sure that we put a strong police service, I didn't say force on purpose, I said police service, out into our community so we can provide the best service to everybody out here. So that would be my response.
Thank you, Chief. Question number 12. Do you feel that the funding mechanisms that have worked in other areas, including but not limited to economic improvement districts, local income tax, local payroll tax, gas tax, and increases in property taxes rates, have been thoroughly examined and exhausted to the point that you are willing to enact a new sales tax or food and beverage tax at council level without a vote of the people who have elected you to serve as their voice? I think that might be appropriate for a council member to respond to if you so desire. Is there a council member that would like to vote? Councilor Fazer?
Sure. From my individual perspective, if it's asking, have we looked into other revenue sources and brought to the decision that we are going to implement a tax without a voice of the people, the answer is no, in my opinion, period. Okay? However, it is wise for us to look at other communities that have implemented novel revenue sources, right, that we're currently investigating, because the more we know about it, the better informed the people can be when it comes time, when we ask them, should we implement that tax?
Thank you. Councilor Lillies?
Well, I think I pretty well spoke my thoughts earlier, because I do feel that we have truly looked to the people, and yet when we did the survey, we did see that people want public safety. I mean, I can't imagine having to let go of our public safety. And we chose not to do the levy, more on the levy, because we've tried that over and over and it didn't work. I do know, after we lost the money from logging and what have you, that we increased our transit lodging tax to one of the highest in the state. We have 12%, which is one of the highest in the state of Oregon. And part of the reason that we did that is because 30% of that money could be used for public safety. 70% of it by law must be used to promote 50 miles and beyond, to bring more people into your community. So there are a lot of legal challenges. One of the questions that I've gotten from several people is, well, why don't we try a gas tax? I know Portland is trying to renew their gas tax. Well, if we renew the gas tax, we would have better roads, but we can't use gas tax money for public safety. There are certain rules that come in government that if the kind of the nexus. I think, I would prefer not to have to do a sales tax. I would prefer not to do a food and beverage tax. Once again, my leaning is towards the sales tax because it spreads it thinner amongst more people, and I do not want to target the restaurant business, and particularly our downtown area. And I know it is a very unpopular thing, but I also know that without public safety, we don't have a community. And so there comes a point, and we do know that there can be a referendum. I mean, that's just the way it is. But we have to come up with something. And our options are food and sales tax, or to put it on the water bill. In Jacksonville, they have a $25 a month police fee and a $35 a month fire fee, and they're getting ready to increase it. So other communities have done that. I think there are over 56 cities that have fees for public safety or parks on their water bill. So that is something that a lot of communities have done. But in looking at our water bill, because we do know we have a water treatment plant that we're going to also need, it makes it more difficult for us. And right now we're waiting to hear. We're in the final stages of a grant that we're hoping will cover the costs of the rise in the cost for the water treatment plant, and we are saying that if we get that grant, then we won't have to raise our water fee. And we're in the final stages of finding out. And once again, it's hurry up and wait, which is where we're at. But we've worked really hard to not put more on our water, but we will have to put something. So raising $8 million, knowing that truly if we wanted to get to 62 officers, which is our goal down the road, you're talking $10, $12 million. I don't know where else to get it and how to spread it the thinnest that we can spread it. And so basically, if we don't make some sort of decision, we're just basically saying that the police and fire will be reduced. And personally, that's not something I feel comfortable doing.
Councilor Pell?
Yeah, I think that's a really good summation, Valerie. I think that and everything was really accurate. I think that the focus of this question was, I believe, whether or not, the council should enact something without a vote of the people. And for me, and I'm not trying to be evasive or overly philosophical, but when we look at our form of government, which was loosely based in England, House of Commons, House of Lords, and which essentially in this country was, we kind of modeled our Senate and House of Representatives. One of the houses was essentially was empowered to essentially act and make decisions. The other one was more created to represent the people. It's a very fine line. We don't have that delineation here with our city council. We make decisions every meeting that you have entrusted us to make on your behalf. Not every decision that we make at every meeting goes to a vote of the people. Obviously, this is a very important decision, huge implications for livability, safety, as well as finance. But it really comes down to, on many issues, were we elected to lead and make decisions, or were we elected to go back and ask the people on every decision we're supposed to make? So it's really, it's a very fine line, and it's not really clear, which is partially why we're all here tonight considering it and having a problem, or I shouldn't say having a problem, but it's not an easy decision. So it's, again, some parts of our government were a little more clear that way, but on some things, you all trust us to, on an ongoing basis, make decisions for you. This is one that is our biggest decision. What are we going to do if, are we going to, as Valerie, questioned, would we let public safety go down? Would we let the public safety departments become diminished, et cetera, et cetera? That may not be good for the town, in our view. So we've got to decide which way are we going to go. It's not an easy decision.
Councilor King. Thank you, Councilor Pell.
Well, I agree with everything that's been said. And just real quickly, there's just two questions there. One, did we feel that the funding mechanisms that have worked in other areas have been thoroughly examined? Yes. I feel that way, and I feel very comfortable if you'd like to discuss any of those. In terms of whether it's going to be with or without the vote of the people, that is yet to be determined by future council action.
Thank you, Councilor King. Question number 13. Why don't we impose a tax for all sales to out-of-state visitors? I think that's a funding question.
So I think I get where this question was going. Why us inside the city? Why can't we just get all the people who are coming in, because we are a tourism town? The problem with that is, obviously we would be reducing our revenues because we would reduce the number of people in which would be eligible to be taxed. You're also looking at, this isn't necessarily a widespread approach throughout the rest of the nation. Yes, this is a potential option that council could explore, but again, it's not necessarily widely practiced. And that, I think, goes back to potentially what Councilor Pell was mentioning before of programming POS systems for a business owner. And when we are looking at some of these options, and as Augustus and I pour through some of these different tax codes, we are definitely having a conversation about operations, things that are not only beneficial to the city as far as financial, but also what can we expect the community to also be able to track and monitor and report back to us.
Thank you. Oh, Mayor.
I think we need to add into this because I had an extensive conversation yesterday with people about the tourism lodging tax that people pay when they, or transient lodging tax, when they stay in local motels and hotels, because obviously that's a way to capture outside audience. But the state has very specific requirements for what lodging tax dollars can be spent on. And the majority of that does need to go to tourism marketing and facilities. And here in Grants Pass, we do have a portion of it going to help with public safety as well. So we are using that to help support public safety to the extent that we're able to, but it does have requirements. I just also wanted to point out that the reason why both the food and beverage tax and the general sales tax are still on the table and being discussed is that either one of those options would tax anybody who was spending money inside the city limits. So for those city residents who would pay the full cost of a utility fee, if it's placed on your water bill, that's not true of either a sales tax or a food and beverage tax. People who live in the county and do business in the city, as well as anybody from out of state or out of town, would also be paying that retail sales or the food and beverage tax. But the retail sales has a capacity to generate a much larger amount of revenue than the food and beverage tax, since that's just related to a particular segment. So that's why the council is considering those options.
Thank you, Mayor. Question number 14. Can you explain what research you have done in other areas outside of ours that need funding for public safety, and how did they accomplish this with success without adding more burden in the form of fees and taxes that never go away? That's a tough one to get a question to. JC, you might have an idea to wrap your head around that one?
Yeah, I think I get where the person is going with the question. Plainly speaking, this isn't a Grants Pass issue. This is a state of Oregon issue. Measure 547 and 50 have limited everybody in the state. What you are seeing now is not necessarily cities choosing to do nothing, but a lot of cities are enacting some kind of revenue mechanism to pay for their general fund city services. And it's not just public safety, there's other things out there. There's over 50 cities in the state of Oregon that have some kind of utility fee to provide some kind of city service. The city of Eugene recently enacted their public safety payroll tax. The city of Medford, close by, has a utility fee for their public safety. The city of Jacksonville has one for police and fire. A city our size, like the city of Corvallis and the city of Albany, both have utility fees to help with their city services as well. So if there was a magical reduction of somehow we could not put the burden on the community, I think that would be widespread, and you would see it in other communities in the state of Oregon.
Thank you. Mayor?
Yeah, I just want to elaborate on measures 547 and 50. In the mid to late 1990s, tax reform measures capped the way that property taxes are collected. So in a kind of ideal environment from the tax revenue perspective, as your house prices increase, that amount that you pay on property taxes would increase as well, with inflation. Those property tax measures capped it at 3%. So even though homes in Grants Pass, the home values have risen quite a bit over the last 20, 30 years since those tax forms were implemented, we have artificially low taxes because we had lower property tax rates than other parts of the state. But every single part of the state, every single city and county is dealing with this. It's the same reason why Josephine County has a problem. We have the lowest county tax rate in the state of Oregon. Our city taxes, I don't know where we rank exactly, but it's relatively low. And they can only increase your assessed value on your homes are only increasing at a rate of 3% a year, which means that the city gets 3% more each year in property taxes, but anytime that inflation or expenses are more than 3%, we have this growing gap. So that's the problem that we're dealing with here. And I would say really the ultimate fix would be at the state level to fix those property tax issues. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to do that here. So we have to deal with the problem here in Grants Pass, and it's Band-Aid solutions, and every community is dealing with this. You know, you come up with a levy or some sort of way to fix the problem for the here and now, but ultimately that 3% issue is ongoing, and every city in the state's dealing with it.
Thank you, Mayor. Question number 15. Why is the City Council choosing to consider the general sales tax over the food and beverage referred to in the survey? Councilor Riker?
Last year, we had a forum on the pros and cons of each method of funding, and it was good to get that input. And as Councilor Pell has indicated, it's a tough decision on deciding what to choose. The thing is, we're trying to choose a level of service. We don't want to see that service go down, be taken away from us. We enjoy the city, and we want to protect the city. So as we go forward, we will have to weigh our consideration, and we will look for input from the public, and we look for public support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Lovelace?
Yeah, if you take a look at the funding matrix that you have, I think probably as crazy it is, and we've been looking at this for a long time, and it's really confusing, particularly for me, but I finally figured it out. If you look at the food and beverage, I personally would not want to ever go above 5% for the food and beverage tax, because that is targeting one particular industry. If you look at that, to get to just $8 million, and walking right across there, we would have to have a $17 public safety fee just to get to the $8 million, which would just get us now, but it's not going to help us increase down the road. So at 5% food and beverage tax, to get to 8.7 million, we would have to have a $17 fee, and that's what we're kind of trying to do, is balance it. If you turn over to the other page, and you look at the sales tax going down, and you take a look at 1.5, and you go to that same 1695, you're looking at 11.6 million. So with a decrease and having the rate lower across the board, you have much more capacity for us to say, wow, you know, if we need more, we're not going to have to try to push up the food and beverage tax, because at that point we'd have to double the food and beverage tax to get the same amount of money, and that to me does not seem fair. The food and beverage, probably anybody who's been in the restaurant business knows that's one of the industries that has the very thinnest profit margin, and that is not who you want to target. I think you really need to spread it out, and based upon what Rob said, I don't know about you, but I do a little travel, and I went back to Tennessee last year with my family. I didn't go in and look at every bill and say, I'm not paying that. I'm not paying that sales tax. I'm not paying that sales tax. You don't. And 1.5, and I have said this from day one, I would cap it and say it would could never be raised without a vote of the people, because I don't really want to do it. But I also know that really ideally I would want a vote of the public. And so you can write into the ordinance that it cannot be raised without a vote of the people, and just keep it there and keep it simple and keep it thin and keep it out. And I think that's what we're looking at. That's why we were able to bring down the utility fee, because we know that a utility fee of what we would have to go to, when we were just looking at the utility fee alone, you're talking $26 a month to each individual residency, and a lot more for business, and that just seemed like a real burden. So the more you can spread that out and have that money to where, as we need to increase, we can go there, I just think that's the best route. And that's why myself, I put that to a general sales tax as opposed to a food and beverage, because it brought in more money, it spread it out farther, and it allowed us not to have to increase utility fee to where we would need to keep our police and fire whole.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor DeLaGrange?
Yeah, thanks for that, Val. I think I would just add that I've heard some people comment that, you know, we did the survey asking about the funding options and how to solve this problem, and it's true, the food and beverage tax did get the most favorable response on the survey. Unfortunately, when we did the survey, at least at a council level, I don't think we had a grasp on what that looked like in subsequent years, in year 2 and year 3 and all the way out to year 5. And once you start looking at the numbers long term and you get out to year 5, after we did the survey, we came to the realization that a food and beverage tax does not have the power to I guess, sustain what we need for public safety. So once you get to year 4 and year 5, you know, we'd be having to ratchet up a food and beverage tax to 8%, 9%, 10%, and that's just not feasible to burden one industry with that kind of rate. So I wish we knew that before we did the survey, because we probably would have changed the survey to reflect that. But unfortunately, we didn't quite have a grasp on that at the time. So that's why we're not necessarily, that option isn't necessarily our first choice right now, even though it was the first choice of people that took the survey.
Councilor Pell? Thank you, Councilor.
As I see it, roughly the amount of money that when the council is talking about increasing funding for public safety, we were looking at roughly $9.5 million a year to implement, and correct me if I'm wrong, JC, but roughly that's what we were talking about at our last workshop, roughly $9.5 million. And one way to get there would have been 1.5% sales tax and 12-cent utility fee, roughly, right? Huh? I'm sorry, $12 per month, sorry. So another way to get there, same $9.5 million, or roughly, is a 5% food and beverage tax with $17 or 18 cent, or $17, $18 per month utility fee. That's basically they net an equal amount of money. And if council wants to, you know, actually, I didn't know we were going to be debating or discussing, even presenting options tonight, but in that regard, as far as preferences go. But there are things to consider, certainly just beyond the math. There's social implications, and I can tell you that I've spent about roughly 6 or 7 hours talking to other business owners and restaurant owners in the last week. And if they have to make a choice, neither choice do they really want to do, of course. It was not hard to predict. Virtually every general business owner feels that a food and beverage tax would be more reasonable and affect less people negatively, and the restaurant owners are irate that they would ever be singled out as one industry. It's the way I see it, to have the only city in the state with a general sales tax is definitely a stigma. Virtually every business owner that I've talked to has said that virtually all tourists at one point or another mention that they love coming to Grants Pass because we have no sales tax. And it matters not, I don't think it matters a little, not a huge amount, how much that tax is. We've got shoe stores that say that people come up from California and buy $200, $300 pair of boots because there's no tax here. Bike stores, jewelry stores, and they all say the same thing. And what I was a little bit surprised with when I was going around talking to different business owners, even purveyors of lower ticket items, were saying the same thing, that tourists, especially and people from out of the area, are very, very happy to come to a place with no sales tax. So the social implications of a sales tax, I believe, are far the negative social implications are far greater. And I don't know that all the council necessarily embraces that concept or believes that concept to the degree that I do. I personally know that if my wife and I are going out to eat on the cheap and we spend $40, an extra $2, if it was a 5% restaurant tax, wouldn't mean a lot to us. And I know that if we're going out and spending $100, which we might do rarely, the extra $5 is something that we would pay. When I asked business owners if they agreed with that, every single one of them agreed with that they didn't feel that a 5% food and beverage tax would affect people's dining out habits very much. I know that if I'm on vacation and there's a tax, a restaurant tax, or any kind of sales tax, it doesn't make any difference on how much I tip. I don't tip less because of that. So there's social implications, and I think that while, yes, restaurant owners would be irate, and there's hundreds of them that would be irate, I think that in a few months the general public might not necessarily feel that badly about our food and beverage tax. I think that tourists and the general public and merchants, and the merchants have told me, that a sales tax at any amount is very, very objectionable to them.
Thank you, Councilor. Question number 16. How can anyone make a decision regarding sales tax or food and beverage tax when we have no idea how much of that money will go to the vendor of such service? JC, you've done some research on that, so.
Yeah, and Councilor Pell touched on this a little bit earlier with the food and beverage tax in the city of Ashland, as well as what we currently have in the city of Grants Pass with our lodging tax. There is a percentage able to be kept by each vendor as part of that administration of that tax. Currently, our lodging tax inside the city of Grants Pass, each vendor is allowed to keep 5% of what they collect. And so I'm guessing council will weigh that decision in the future.
Thank you, JC. Question number 17. Why would we choose a sales tax or food and beverage tax when it would be subject to a referendum? Augustus, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take that one. As the city council has been elected by you to represent you and to lead, to make decisions, the staff has been appointed to provide council with as many options as possible. I think it's clear in the presentation that the council has been diligent in its efforts to try to figure out an answer to this issue, which has been going on for the last 10 years. All of that said, most of the ordinances or resolutions that the city council pass are subject to referendum. But as Councilor Pell put it, not everything comes up for a referendum because you've entrusted the city council with making a lot of those decisions that do affect you on a day-to-day basis. And at a local level, it's a lot more control. And as you get bigger, it's supposed to get smaller or become less control. But on the whole, it's really a matter of the staff trying to provide options for the city council. They ask us questions, we try to provide them answers with the best information that we have. So.
Thank you. Councilor Pell?
Augustus, would it not also be true that a utility fee could be subject to referendum?
No, that is absolutely true. It would be an ordinance that would be enacted by the city council. Like I said, most ordinances and resolutions that are passed by a city council with very, very few exceptions are subject to referendum. And that might include really run-of-the-mill decisions that a city council makes.
Okay, thank you. Augustus? Councilor King?
Well, I don't think it's the intent of anybody in this process to force something down people's throat. We got a problem we need to solve. And one of the things that I've experienced when you have a community that has a conflict or an issue, it's an opportunity to come together, not tear each other apart. And so as we work together, and you see it today, we become an even better community. And so I don't I don't determine, if the people want to vote on it, that's great. We're trying to solve the issue, and we'll do the best we can on that, and then you folks can make up your mind, and we'll abide by that, and that's great. And hopefully at the other end of the line, we come out an even better community.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Pell.
I'd just like to say one thing that it was a quote that actually I just happened to read the other day. Some of you may have heard of Thomas Sowell. He's a noted economist and historian. He said that government doesn't come up with solutions, only trade-offs. So this is what we're doing, is we're trying to figure out the trade-offs.
Okay. Question number 18. Why would we try a sales tax and be the first city in Oregon to do so? I think we sort of addressed that, but if someone would like to add to it. Okay. Oh, Councilor David Grange.
No matter what solution we pick for this problem, there's going to be a segment of people that are very upset about it. If it's a sales tax, if it's a food and beverage tax, if it's a utility fee, if we choose to do nothing and have to start laying off public safety staff, any one of those decisions, some amount of people is going to be very upset with us. So, it's the same with the sales tax. There's a segment that's going to be upset if we do the sales tax. And I think the reason that we're considering it is, as I've already said, it spreads the burden over the widest group of people. So no single group, whether it's restaurants or whether it's people that have utility bills, are having to shoulder the entire burden. So from that perspective, it is the best option if you're looking at just that one metric. We would be the first one in Oregon to do so, which is a negative. The rate that we're potentially looking at, a 1.5% rate, in my opinion, there's going to be a lot of people upset up front, and after 6 months, no one's going to bat an eye at 1.5%, especially when it's saving them, a $30 charge on their utility fee or whatever that charge ends up being. So every one of these options has pros and cons. Sales tax definitely has pros and cons, but it's on the table just like the other options.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor O'Shea.
And I think it does bear repeating that although the sales tax is unprecedented in the state of Oregon, communities across Oregon are facing unprecedented issues, including the changing landscape of Measure 110, the changing landscape of use of public spaces, state mandated PERS rates, the cost of vehicle replacements for public safety professionals, you name it. The list goes on and on. We are truly facing an issue that is the size of a mountain, and so we have to view solutions that are equal in size.
Thank you, Councilor. Okay. All right, question 19. I would like a clear picture of the impact on fire and police that not funding them would have. Councilor Rowley? JC. No, not quite.
So I'm not going to try and put either of the chiefs over here on the spot, but generically speaking, if nothing is done, obviously we would have a limited number of resources. In that number of limited resources, as a staff, we would come back to council and the community with what we would recommend, what we could provide with those dollars. Obviously, with less money, there is going to be some kind of a reduction in some kind of service. What that looks like currently, I don't know. I would assume there is some kind of staffing reduction and service level reduction. And again, I don't think the dust has settled quite yet as to, if we do nothing, what that may look like in the next budget year.
Thank you. Councilor Pell?
Yeah, and I'd just like to add or dovetail with what we heard prior from the chiefs, that they're understaffed now, and I believe most on the council probably believes that. So if we don't come up with more funding, not only may there have to be layoffs, but that will also exacerbate the issues of forced overtime, forced callbacks, et cetera, retention. And so the social implications are also there. It's not just dollars and cents.
Thank you, Counselor.
I'll just add that public safety is half of our staff citywide, and that most other departments, or at least some of the other departments, have dedicated funding sources that they receive funds from. So I get a fair number of questions about why we don't fund public safety first if it's our top priority, and it is a top priority. Other things have to be priorities too, providing clean water, definitely a priority, and it's paid for through your water bill. So laying off water staff would not help solve this problem. The thing that will show the greatest effect if we have to make cuts, personnel is our biggest expense, and half of our staff are public safety staff. So, we don't know exactly where the cuts would be made or to what extent things would have to be made if we're put in a situation of tightening the belt, so to speak. But it's not a matter of trimming the fat. The fat's been trimmed over the past 10 years especially. It's getting to the part of the deep cuts now, right? And so that's why we're focused here on public safety, is because unfortunately that level of personnel cuts is the spot where we will see the greatest gain, so to speak, and unfortunately, that means a loss in actual public safety. We're already, at minimal levels now for traffic patrols and, red light signals and some of these other things. So we'll start making cuts, and at this point, we do have to manage, and our both chiefs, fire and police, are always determining, what the priority call is at the moment. And if things stack up at the same time, you have to go to the one that needs the most help at that moment, and the other things get put on the back burner. But they both try to go to everything all the time as soon as they can get to it. And we'll have to start making cuts. And any of you who have been around for a decade, know what that was like for the county 10 years ago. And the county has still been running. They don't even offer 24/7 sheriff's deputies right now. They're on for, I think, maybe 16 hours a day is where they've been at for a while. A whole shift of the day, they don't have any patrol deputies, and hopefully they'll be able to remedy that soon. But we don't want to put the city of Grants Pass in that same situation. And I think that's the puzzle that we have to figure out is how to balance paying for the services that we desire.
Thank you, Mayor.
And just to add to that, I think most people who have insurance costs and understand how insurance works, the reality of it is if you have more claims, your insurance rates go up. And I can tell you, my husband is a businessman in this community, and he has seen his rates go up as a result of theft and other things happening to him. And we know the same with fire. If you don't have a certain ISO, we get a rating based upon the efficiency of our police department. That is one of the factors that's used. So if our fire staffing goes down, then you also have to deal with a insurance rate increase. So it's all tied together.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Facer.
I just want to provide another perspective on this. And if we do not find more money, there will have to be a reduction. We are at that point. The maintenance of level of service at this point, just to maintain 56 officers, costs more money. So it's true when we say either we garner revenue from these four sources or we reduce our level of service. I think that's a really important perspective for everybody in the room to have, right? We can't just skip along like we are at current level of service with the revenue that we have. The only options we have are garner new revenue or reduce the service. I think that's a really important point.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay. Next question is one we're sort of discussed already, but I'd like fire to include the cost of community for a degraded ISO rating, and maybe you can talk about what ISO is, a little more detail.
Yeah, so Councilor Lovelace kind of mentioned a little bit, but ISO is the company that comes out and they actually go through what our performance level is and what we're capable of doing, and then they come out with a number between 1 and 10 based upon what they feel that you can do into your community. 1 being the highest, 10 would be the lowest. We're currently sitting at a ISO level 2. We barely made a 2 last time, and one of the things that we know is if we reduce that number, insurance companies take that back and they base what you guys pay for policy holders on your insurance on that number itself. So a reduction is going to more than likely cause an increase on insurance. Can I give you a specific number? Is it a 5%, a 10%? Every insurance company does a little bit differently. So as many of you have probably policyholders know, there's a lot of variance out there with the insurance companies and what they do. There's a few that don't even necessarily use ISO as a rating themselves, but the majority do. So yeah, if we actually saw a reduction in service, we would definitely see a reduction in ISO, I would expect, which would then also have that impact.
Thank you, Chief. The next couple of questions we may have already answered in the presentation through discussion, but I'll mention them, and if there is any additional feedback, let me know. But how did we end up with this huge shortfall? I think we talked about expenses and revenues. Do you want to add anything else, JC?
I don't think I need to,
Okay.
but if people want me to blather on for another 60 seconds, I could.
No, I think we addressed that in the presentation. Another question is, why wasn't it addressed sooner? I think Councilor Lovelace mentioned it along with the presentation. This is something that's been identified over a decade ago that we've been working on finding solutions. And Councilor DeLaGrange looks like he wants to highlight this one also.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that it has been addressed to the degree that we have been able to address it. We've tried several options for increasing revenue, and we actually have done a few things to increase revenue. On the back table, there's a sheet that outlines 30 things that we've done just since 2021 to reduce our costs, and 7 things we've done to increase revenue. So we have been addressing it. We've reduced operational expenses by close to $4 million in that time. And we've done the work to trim the fat, and we've done the work to address it without going to the public for more revenue. And we've done pretty much everything we can in that regard. So we've been working to address it. It's just a very difficult problem.
Thank you, Councilor. Why wasn't the levy increased and put on the ballot last November? Does a council member want to address that at all? Councilor King?
Well, the simple answer is the council voted to do it as is and put it on the levy, so it was by council vote. That's why it happened the way it did. Now, if you ask each councilor why wasn't the levy increased and put on the ballot last November, you'll get different answers. Some felt like the previous elections where it failed. Some felt like it was a temporary solution, not a permanent solution for funding. Others felt like the percentage of property owners that actually pay the tax in the county is a minority. And so not everybody's paying their fair share. And it could have been increased, but it wasn't because the council voted not to.
Thank you, Councilor. Mayor?
Well, the amount needed for the property tax levy would basically need to double. So it's at $1.79, and it would need to be well over $3 in order to make up this gap. So we knew from previous election that the $1.89 increase, which I was not with the council at the time that they put that forward, but the 10-cent increase was never going to come anywhere close to funding the gap, and yet the public also didn't support that. So I think that that's one reason that we didn't put it on the levy. And then the temporary nature of the levies, and I didn't personally appreciate this initially. So taken me 3 years here to get to this point, but it takes a lot of work to get the levy going every 3 years. And so in addition to what the council's doing as a council and making normal decisions on council business, usually it's people on the council who, or staff, sometimes we have the fire and police unions will help contribute to running a levy, but it takes a whole campaign effort to inform the public. And so when you're doing this like every 3 years, it becomes an extra burden, just the process. And it's kind of unfortunate, you know, because it is a good check and balance. And I know our community has liked the levy for a long time, but it does weigh on people who have to volunteer their time and money to go and campaign for this effort. And so, you know, the levy is a great solution in some ways. It does definitely bring in money, and I think you can tell by the fact that we've had this levy for so many years now, it was one of the initial solutions that the citizens and city implemented, I think, about 30 years ago to help fund this very same problem, you know. So this is not a new problem. The levy was always one of the solutions, and it could still be, but we would need to double it. We're not talking about adding a dime or a quarter to the $1.79. It would need to be close to, I think it was $3.89 was maybe the number we were talking about. And then there are some state things that come into play where you're capped at how much property taxes people can pay. So I think we got to the point where if we increase the levy enough to actually fund this gap, we wouldn't be able to implement it at that level because of statewide caps. So there's just a lot of reasons, but it's pretty complicated stuff, but those are some of them.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Pell?
Yeah, without trying to get into the complicated stuff, the question kind of was, why did we choose a levy if a levy amount that we knew might not be sufficient? And I think it comes down to the concept that a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. We, you know, as Councilor Ogier said earlier, we had a mountain-sized problem here for public safety funding. We chose to go out for a levy that we thought the people would approve to be able to cut that mountain in half. So that was roughly half the money that we needed. And we knew that the citizens would likely pass that. And as everyone else has been saying about the difficulties with passing even a 10-cent increase in a levy, it's just absurdly, I'm not trying to be flippant, but the juice isn't worth the squeeze, even if you do get any juice at all. So to getting back, I'd like to just comment on one thing that Brian mentioned about, you know, what we've cut, roughly $4 million. We did roughly out of the last 3 years, cut $2 million from the budget. And I'll have to say that the budget cutting exercise that we did in 2021, just to put it in perspective for the public, I'd have to say that was probably at least, it was about 20 hours in meeting time, council meeting time, workshop time. I mean, we tried really hard with that. All of us are volunteers, and that was 20 hours, I would say. That's accurate, roughly? At least. We had at least four or five hour meetings, line by line. And I know that, you know, we didn't ask, you know, the public to be involved in that, but that was tedious work. And that wasn't enough. And we did it again 2 years later. It wasn't as difficult the second time. But this hasn't been due to lack of effort on this council's part. It has been difficult. And we had a lot of discussion over a lot of those line items. Some of us wanted to cut some of us wanted to cut others. But we worked at it, and it's not like, you know, $4 million just we snapped our fingers and that just occurred. That was a lot of work. And as people are saying, levies can be worked too. And would a $1.89 even pass? It's proven not to. So we took what we thought, or we gladly accepted what the public would agree to cut this, the mountain-sized problem in half.
Thank you, Councilor Pell. Question number 24. The proposed utility fee is estimated to raise $3.3 million per year. How much money is the proposed sales tax expected to raise? And I think if we would just refer, everyone refer back to the two matrix that JC highlighted, you'll be able to place in there based on the percentage of the sales tax or the amount of the utility fee, what those fees will raise.
Hey, Aaron, just because people who are watching this on the video won't be able to see the matrix, could we have JC answer how much that would be?
Yeah, on page 6 of the handout. Approximately 1.5% would be about $6.9 million annually as estimated. I do want to point out though too, that is still subject to change depending on what items are either allowable to be taxed and or exempted. Those decisions still have not been made, especially in adding a cap to would potentially change that number.
Thank you, JC. How much of this combined new revenue will fund police and fire departments? Councilor Fazer.
Sure. I just want to refer to the funding matrices. They are remarkably useful tools in answering this question. You want to answer the question about how much money is it going to take to fully fund at 100%. That will answer your question. I would encourage anybody and everybody who's interested in this topic to fully familiarize themselves with these funding matrices. That will answer the majority of questions you have about the dollar amount required. Those year boxes that come across on the diagonal, those represent fully funded with growth desire from public safety. So the answer to those questions lie in the funding matrices. So please familiarize yourself with it.
Let's see. Councilor DeLaGrange.
Sure. The question was a little bit unclear. It might be asking what the revenue will be going towards, and I think they're kind of implying, is this funding mechanism going to strictly be for public safety? And if that's what they're asking, then the answer is 100%. This funding mechanism is strictly for public safety. It's not going to be siphoned off to other departments or programs.
Yeah, Councilor DeLaGrange, I think that is the spirit of that question. Question number 26. Will these new sources of revenue allow existing police and fire funding to be diverted to other departments? If so, how much?
So we've thrown out a bunch of numbers tonight. The $3.3 million is the break-even point for the general fund. That still requires some of the general fund resources to go towards public safety. Currently, as it sits in the 2024 budget, police and fire need $5.5 million of general fund money to break even. The next fiscal year, we're estimating that to be close to $7 million without adding people. Adding people adds to that cost. And so we're looking at potentially close to $8.5 million is just to make public safety whole in the next budget cycle.
Thank you, JC. Question number 27. Will this proposed sales tax be voted on by Grants Pass residents, Josephine County residents, or decided by City Council? Councilor King.
So the city council has a decision to make as whether they're going to refer it to the voters or not, and that, they haven't made that decision yet. And then the citizens then also have a decision to make as to whether they want to, what's the legal term?
Referendum.
If they want to have a referendum if the city council chooses not to. So those are the two important steps to pay attention to.
Thank you, Councilor.
It would only involve city voters, though. The
Yes,
question
okay.
does ask about county, and county residents don't get to vote on city matters, so only city residents would vote.
Yes. All right. Next question. What provisions will be used to allow this tax rate to be increased in the future? That's a good question. Anybody on council want to take that one? Councilor Lovelace?
Well, I just would say that the only way I would do it would be if it was, only way it could be increased is by vote of the people. I feel very strongly that way, and I think most of us feel the same way, that it would have to go out to the voters to increase above what we put it at.
Councilor DeLaGrange?
I agree with what Valerie just said. I'm not totally clear if that is is possible to do. I guess I might ask the city attorney if we did do something like that, could a future council just act to, not do that?
Functionally, yes. But that's a kind of practical, that's really getting into the practical question of governing, right? But functionally, I suppose it is possible.
Okay, they would have to pass, another thing to undo that and go through that whole process.
You'd basically be going through, you'd go through the entire process, just pretty much in the opposite direction.
Okay, thanks.
So the last written down, pre-submitted question is, will this tax include food items? If so, which ones? Which ones does it exclude, if any? Councilor DeLaGrange?
Well, I guess I would just say that the finer details of any of these options hasn't totally been ironed out yet. If it was, like, say, for example, a sales tax, there are some things that would be excluded, definitely, like groceries, medications, things that are, necessary items would certainly be excluded, but above and beyond that, council hasn't gotten to the point where those decisions have been made.
One thing I will say is that you can't tax something that's already being taxed. You can't have double taxation. So an example is alcohol, cigarettes, anything that's currently taxed, you could not put another tax on top of. So, it's another reason, I hate to admit this, but when I go out to a restaurant, oftentimes the majority of my bill is alcohol and not food, and that's not the majority, but it is a part because, face it, alcohol is extremely expensive. So that's a good part of the bill, but that couldn't be taxed. The only thing that could be taxed would be the food on a food and beverage. They couldn't tax the alcohol again. So there is a law about that.
Councilor Pell?
Yeah. Okay. I've never seen Valerie drink in city council chambers or anywhere else, for that matter. Rest assured. But just getting back to what Brian was saying, I think council hasn't specifically discussed it yet. I would think that we would all end up agreeing with what he said about food items would not be taxed and so forth. But if I'm not mistaken, 13 states actually do have tax on groceries. Which to me is mind-boggling, and I would never vote for that. But actually, in some places, they do. I visited Hawaii once. There was tax in the grocery store. I was shocked. I'm thinking, this has to be the only place in the world they would ever do this. And I looked it up, and there's many states that do. But I don't think that we would. I know that I wouldn't, and I think that's the sentiment of the whole council.
Thank you, Councilor. All right, so we have a number of written down questions that you have provided, and we want to make sure we get through these so your questions can also be heard. Some of these may have been answered already. This one is a potential one that has already been answered by Councilor Pell just recently. How seriously have you looked at reducing other services in the community to fund police and fire? I think Councilor Pell mentioned the two scenarios that we went through, and Mayor, did you have something to add?
Well, we have reduced things. I guess one thing that comes up frequently in terms of reduction, and I did state that, what a significant portion of our city budget the Public Safety Department is. Our entire operating fund for the Parks Division is $3.5 million. So, we would have to eliminate our entire Parks Department and potentially sell off park property or whatever in order to save $3.5 million, which, as we've discussed earlier, wouldn't solve this problem. So I think, this idea that we could just make, let's say, 10% cuts in other departments in order to not have this problem, the math doesn't work like that. So we would have to look at significant cuts. And as Councilor DeLaGrange mentioned, he has a handout on the back table that you probably mostly don't have because it came in after you were sitting down, but it does list off a number of things that have been cut over just the last couple of years here, including, freezing a number of positions. We were lucky to not have to make layoffs over the last couple of years, but the council implemented freezes of vacant positions, and police lost a number of positions, and they're feeling it. And some of us have been accused of defunding the police, as a result of losing those positions. So we can't, we can't, I guess, have it both ways. We have to find funding or we will lose positions. That's the trouble here.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, next question. In light of the funding crisis, how can council think hiring 6 more is smart? I think that's talking about the additional level of service that both chiefs talked about earlier. So the question is, in light of a funding crisis, how can council think hiring 6 more is smart? So adding FTE, as staff has mentioned. Councilor Riker?
We already have a shortage on staff just because of vacations and this new Oregon law on family leave. Also, anytime you have an injury, somebody's off, and people are retiring. So we need to have those positions to maintain almost the current level of service that we have at this time. Thank you.
I think it just basically comes down to how much do you value the service level that you are receiving now, and knowing if you've been out there, you know that right now our level of service is less than it was in 2014. So with the increase in the population, and we know the problems that have come about since 2014, to think that we're dealing with less police officers than we were, and knowing with family leave and some of these other things before, they didn't have to necessarily be on administrative leave. So there's a lot of things that come down from the state that you have to do. So that has put a lot more pressure, and you heard the police chief and the fire chief know how stressed and how many of our members have left. I mean, I can't tell you how many people used to be at interviews for police and fire, and they're not there. There's not a lot of people that don't want to go into being police and fire. I don't know about you, but when I hear a siren, I am so glad that it's not me running towards them, that somebody else is. And retaining our public safety is what makes our community what it has always been. So there's a cost to losing public safety, and that's something we have to factor in.
Councilor DeLaGrange.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to add that adding 6 to 8 positions is essentially getting police back to the staffing level they were at 5 years ago or 6 years ago, when clearly the city is only, growing and having not less problems. And then on the fire side, I don't know if y'all recall, but Chief DeLong was saying that we run 2 to an engine when minimum standard is 3, and a lot of companies are going to 4 now. So we're doing our fire department a disservice by funding them at a level where they have 2 to an engine, and it's just not safe for them, and it's making them less effective. So that's why I feel like those positions are justified.
Thank you, Councilor Pell.
Yeah, I guess the question is, kind of what's the smart move here, and, are we doing things that are smart or not? And on the list that was on the back table with regards to public safety, I mean, just some of the things out of the hundreds of line items that we went through in the last few years, there's at least a dozen lines there. We delayed hiring a police captain for 6 months. We froze the records specialist. We froze the police officer position, reduced police response to low priority calls, reduced funding for a police cadet program, reduced funds for the student firefighter program, et cetera, et cetera. So these might all be the smart moves, and quite frankly, it may not be so smart to continue down that path. So I wish that there was a way for that questioner to be able to see the list of cuts that we've made, and but continuing down that path of cutting more out of. And as Brian just said, I mean, it's actually, in some ways, this exercise would just reestablish our police force as whole and prevent further degradation of the fire department.
Thank you, Councilor.
Yeah,
Councilor Lovelace.
I just want to add something about the fire department, because this is something that happened in my life 3 years ago. It's something that's in the city manager reports under fire. That's something probably don't understand what it means. It's a medic zero. And what that means is the number of times that there's an ambulance that is not available in our community. Well, what happens when there's not an ambulance available is our fire department is there. And they're there. So they're the first ones on the scene, and they're the ones that save the lives. So in my husband's case, he had a stroke. And it was the fire department that saved his life, because they had to route a ambulance at that time from Rogue River, which it's my understanding they no longer use the Rogue River for an ambulance. So, that's becoming increasingly more of an issue as well, as that it is our medics that are the first ones on the scene, and you want them there. They want them there to save your life, because if you don't have anybody there right away and you're waiting for the ambulance to show up, they're not going to do you. Nothing's going to happen. So I think that's something that is a little known, but is an important feature and a fact for people to watch in those city manager reports. How many times is it called Medic Zero or something? Medic Zero comes up, and it's coming up more and more and more often, and that's something that most people don't understand. I've lived it. It matters.
Thank you, Councilor. So next question is pertaining to, I'll try to summarize some of this. Last year, we were talking about the possibility of a monthly fee on our utility bill that provided approximately a $25 a month fee to residents. It also mentioned that businesses would be more expensive, such as Walmart, and the Walmart estimate was approximately $8,000 a month. Are these numbers approximately appropriate, because the $8,000 a month would equal about 320 homes? Are these assumptions correct?
So when we're looking at projections, obviously the more you go out, the less stable they are, as I would like to be confident in my projections. I don't have a crystal ball, but what I can do is estimate based on what we have. When looking at that projection earlier, if you go out the 5 years, that 25 or 30-ish dollar, I think that we came into, was looking at it like we would do a levy for FTE. And so when you look at a levy, you look at what the year 3 would cost you, not the current year. And so this paring down to a potential $12 utility fee as far as single-family residential is maintaining the gap, not necessarily fully funding public safety.
Thank you. Councilor Pell?
Yeah, one point that I'd like to make that a lot of, many people know and many people probably are unaware of, is that with a public safety levy or even our property taxes, there are many nonprofits that essentially pay zero towards public safety. We know that there's a lot of police calls at the hospital. Much of Asante is nonprofit. Much of it pays no levy, no public safety levy, no property tax. Utility fees will get and will be collected from entities like that. And I just go back, council may have heard me say this story, but 10, 12 years ago, whenever it was, that we got at that time a big new ladder truck. Council, I wasn't on council at that time, but council was told, we need this 4-story ladder truck to be able to service the new building at Asante, which I found incredibly ironic because the new building wasn't even paying any public safety taxes. So a utility fee does get some of that as well, which to me is a really good reason to have that as part of our solution.
Thank you, Councilor. So next question was taking a comment here. Page 2 of our handout clearly says that groceries, over-the-counter medications would potentially be taxable under the proposed sales plan, yet Councilor stated that these items would not be taxed. Which of the situations is correct or true? I think the point is those details, the fine details of what's to be included and what's not going to be included are yet to be defined. And that would be subsequent discussions at a council level once a true funding mechanism was chosen.
If I could add on to that, since I was the one who compiled this list, it does say groceries and then groceries purchased under federal programs under exempt. So in my research into other jurisdictions and how they implement a sales tax, the vast majority do not place a tax on groceries. And there are some places that do. These are potential examples. Council hasn't had any conversations or any deliberations about what will and will not be taxed yet. And so all this was to provide an example as to things that could be taxed. It was never meant to be a final determiner of what council is going to tax.
I would just add that in all of our conversations about this, and I haven't heard any counselor say that they would want to consider taxing groceries or taxing essentials. And if there's any council up here that feels differently, feel free to correct me, but I don't think that that is the case at all.
Yeah, that's true. The discussion has always been prepared foods and not your groceries.
So I only have a couple more questions here in my hands, and a lot of them are repeats, so I'll mention that. If there are any other questions, please make sure to get them to Karen, and before we go on to the next phase of this. There is a question here that's talking about what, are you focusing on food and beverage and why? And then asking if it's going to go to a vote or not. There is another one about, is it going to go to a vote, or are you going to be making that decision yourself? What is the percentage that's going directly to emergency services? We did answer that, but there was a follow-up question also to this. What percentage of those funds would go to an administration fee? Would there be an administration fee associated with those?
I don't think there would be an administration fee. There hasn't ever been an outline. The only administration charge fee would be potentially the administration fee that the vendor would then keep on their side of doing the collection on behalf of the
That part
city.
you mentioned on the TLT that we do with the transient lodging tax. Okay. There was one question here asking what the business's thoughts are on potentially losing business to Medford if a sales tax was implemented. That's a question on how those businesses would feel. I think that's a question of the businesses, and we're exploring that. Does anybody, I don't know if that's a question of Councilor Lovelace, you want to?
Well, I think that basically comes down to where you have to think about a 1.5 is a pretty low amount, and keeping it low. I mean, I can't imagine driving. I mean, some people shop right now as it is at Costco and whatever, and I'm sure they'll probably pick up more things at Costco. I get that. I really do get that and understand it. But you also have to think about the fact that 1.5% is not very high, and the amount of gas it would take to drive to Medford and back, if you're just going to avoid it, is not really financially smart. But I understand you're going to have some people that are just going to boycott, and that's just a reality. But I think, like I said, I don't not travel to places because they have sales tax, and I can guarantee you, I don't think I've been to a state where there's only been a 1.5 sales tax. It's usually much higher. So that's our reason for keeping it low and spreading it out, is because for 1.5%, I'm not going to travel somewhere else to save my money.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Pell?
Yeah, I would agree that 1.5% is pretty low, but I also would like to remind everyone that, and councilors have already gotten this data several years ago, from Soretti, Southern Oregon, whatever, business group. Roughly 4,000 to 5,000 people a day drive from Josephine County to Jackson County every day for work. They're already driving there. Would it be human nature for them to shop more when they're over there if we have a sales tax here? To me, the answer is, of course, yes. If you're buying an $800 or $1,000, set of tires for your car or more, and you're already going over there, or you're buying a new lawnmower, or whatever, you know, I think it's really obvious. I mean, I really, you know, I jokingly said that if I were the Medford Chamber of Commerce, one of the best things that could be done for their business would be for Grants Pass to have a sales tax, or vice versa, you know. So while yes, it's low, I agree. I think that it's human nature that if people are already there, or they're already, most young families have a Costco membership, they're there once a month anyway. So would people drive out of their way? There'd be a few people who would enjoy sticking it to Grants Pass and driving out of the way, buy a pair of socks over there, you know. But there's thousands of people every day who are already in Medford. Would they buy more over there? I believe they would.
Thank you, Councilor. 2 more cards left. One is just asking for you to be aware of the middle class and them not being able to afford another tax. More of a statement than a question. And then the other question was, why are non-safety positions included in the funding narrative, and there are not non-funding safety positions included in the narrative? We're talking a crime analyst, 3 police officers, and 3 firefighters. So. Councilor Fazer.
Could that perhaps be referring to a Parks employee on the recent ask? Maybe elaborating on that would be appropriate.
Likely so. That was in the very first presentation. That was myself as a budget officer letting council know that that was another budget issue that would affect general fund ultimately, that we'll be requesting through the budget process. And with that, that concludes our portion of the learning and listening session. I want to first start by thanking staff, thanking council, and thanking you for providing the input for those questions and providing your time to listen. We now have an opportunity for you to let council know what they need to know. This is an opportunity for you to speak to council on the dais here. Please go to the podium and speak into the microphone, give your name and area of residence. Address your comments to council as a whole, not to individuals. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to provide comments. There is a green light, a yellow light, and a red light. The green light is go. The yellow light means you have 30 seconds remaining, and the red light means your time is up. Note that it's not a dialogue. Council's here to listen to and learn from you on what your views are on the items that we've discussed this evening. If you have any kind of specific factual questions, please feel free to either ask any of the staff members that you see here. There's business cards also of the council, and you can ask council later on. There's a lot of information. Everything you're hearing tonight is also on our website. And no demonstrations of clapping, cheering, or booing are allowed. And again, we greatly appreciate your time today. And with that, Mayor, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Aaron. You did a great job facilitating, and thanks to everyone for showing up tonight and being patient as you took in a lot of information there. Do you have a question?
I just wanted to make a quick statement before public comment began.
Okay, so we're going to allow you to come up. You do have 2 minutes. Please, out of respect for everyone in the audience, when the red light goes off, time to stop, and yeah, keep the cheering and comments. It's just, yeah, not the time for it tonight. Council will not be making any decisions later tonight. We're going to take all this information in. We will have a meeting on February 7th where we'll be discussing this issue again. There will be another opportunity for public comment on February 7th. I know a lot of people are watching this on video and from home tonight, so say what you have.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm really looking forward to hearing public comment, and if you're willing and able, as part of your comment, to not only tell us what we shouldn't do, but what you think we should do, that would be extremely helpful. Thank you.
Yep. All right. First up, state your name and let us know whether or not you're a city resident.
Rika Brown, Grants Pass. Our city's finance director has made clear that a $64 utility fee for public safety could pay for the 29 public safety workers that our city manager has stated he wants, but would be crushing to the poor. By omitting sales tax from criticism, he implied, that a 4% sales tax could do the whole job by itself without putting restaurants out of business or pushing people out of their homes. If we need 29 more public safety employees, we need them soon, not several years from now. Public safety is not a utility and does not belong on our utility bills. Utilities are vital services available to everybody with utility hookups at all hours, day and night, without discrimination, excepting accidents and natural disasters. They also have huge spread out infrastructure that makes huge overhead to build and maintain, but few workers to run them, which makes them natural monopolies. Police and firefighters are relatively many workers and their equipment who are not always available when called upon, but our firefighters and police help outside their area when necessary. We really do need more police, community service officers, and firefighters. A general sales tax is the most powerful and fairest tax, reaching everybody, tourists, churches, nonprofits, and homeless included. It is the easiest to pay since it is only paid when buying taxed goods and/or services. It automatically covers inflation. People spend according to their income, so it's easiest for the poor. Go straight to the goal of hiring those 29 public safety employees by passing only a 4% general sales tax.
I know it's a minute shorter than usual, but we have to keep it tight. Thank you. Next.
I'm Matthew Dion, and I just want to say, starting with the sales tax, it may start small, but you just have to look at California and realize it's not going to work. And utility fees, I say no, really just no taxes, and we should see what happens if, sorry, for the police and fire department, we should see what happens with further reduction in these services, because listening to everyone here has opened my eyes a bit and realizing that I know very little. I just think we should learn and see what happens with further reduced public services, as much as that would be very bad for our community. But sales tax, this reeks of California, and I don't. We shouldn't have that stink here in Oregon. Thank you very much, council members and public servants. Thank you very much.
Matthew, do you live in the city limits?
Oh, yes, I do.
Thank you.
I live about 10 minutes from here, a 10-minute walk. Thank you very much.
My name is Adriana. I've been a criminal prosecutor in Grants Pass, and I've been a criminal defense attorney in Grants Pass, and I've been a victim of multiple crimes in Grants Pass. And so when it comes to funding public safety, I say to you, do whatever it takes. Thank you.
Adriana, do you live in the city limits?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
And I need fire department because I have a 100% chance of burning down in a fire according to my insurance. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Alan. I live in the city, and you've gotten some emails from me before about this subject, and I want to thank you very much for the work you're doing. This is a very tough decision. I've laid out in my emails. I appreciate the solemnness that you've looked at this, and like the previous speaker, I support what you're trying to do because it's important, and it's important for just a couple things. Again, I'm a representative of Firefighter Action Support Team. It's a groundswell of support for funding from the fire department and the police department, ensuring that our city is a safe place to live. But most important to me to bring to your attention is that it's crucial to make a decision and move soon. You all have been talking about it, and you know that you're under a time crunch here. You're going to have a continued loss of personnel to other departments, has been discussed here. You're also in the process of trying to recruit a new fire chief. And with a stable funding situation in place, or at least working towards one, it's going to be much easier to get that person on board. And pretty much you've got one shot at doing this. Because if you fail at this, then your chances of getting anything else done later on is going to be that much harder for you to do. So I appreciate the solemnness you're taking towards this. I appreciate the fact you're going over this, but pretty soon you're going to have to make a decision. And I really appreciate the quote that Councilor Pell came up with, is that it's really just about trade-offs. And you guys are going to have to make the decision. I support that. Thank you very much.
Good evening, gentlemen, ladies. My name's Eric Fitch. I am a resident of Grants Pass now. You guys have shot yourself in the foot from your past experiences and doing things to the community and the businesses for decades, and now you're asking for help. We're not saying that we wanted to exclude the fire department. We do need it, and we do need our chief. I think Chief Warren Hitzman is a great piece of our community, but our police department is the problem, whether you believe it or not. When you retaliate against our businesses and our families, you make yourselves look low. And you can sit there and frown like you are, but it is what's happened. You go after people's homes, and then you go to their jobs to try to get them fired. And then you come here wanting support, and that's not going to happen. And it's not me just saying it. This is hundreds and hundreds of people in the community that have denied your guys' levy. So you guys need to make a strong decision on what you're going to do with this community. And if you're actually wondering if you're going to save us or protect us or whatever you want to call it, safety, you're not doing a good job. And we demand more from you. We're paying you professional wages, and we're getting childish behaviors. I wish you guys the best. I think you guys do a great job. Fire department, you're great. Good day. See you next Wednesday.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, fellow members of the community. My name is Bracken Sharp. I'm a city resident. I'm also the Vice President of the Grants Pass Professional Firefighters, IAFF Local 3564. I want to start out by acknowledging the dire spot that we were in. It's been touched on tonight, but funding for police and fire services has been a decades-old issue that has come to a head. We've funded our most vital services by a deficient levy that has led us to the unfortunate and dangerous position that we're in today. We have a critically understaffed fire and police departments that are responding to an increased number of calls for service year after year with a tremendous, a funding source that is requiring us to continually cut budgets and operate at a tremendously bleak level that will only suffer more if adequate funding is not established for today and for the future. This funding is essential for the safety of the citizens and the community of Grants Pass. Paying additional on an already high utility bill, and a potential sales or food and beverage tax in the city is a tough pill to swallow. We all get that. I fully understand the frustration about increasing taxes and fees because it sucks, plain and simple. What I do also recognize is that with this, it's funding a service that drops everything that they are doing at all times of the day and night whenever you call to immediately respond to any needs of the citizens and fix, find, or solve whatever hardship they are having in a professional and thorough manner, not only for the citizens of Grants Pass, but those outside city limits, visitors, travelers, everyone. I will ask council and the community this to ponder on. What do you expect from your fire department when you call 911? If you expect your firefighters to show up quickly, mitigate the emergency, save life and property, then we desperately need this additional funding. It is our mission to provide unparalleled fire rescue and emergency medical services to our deserving community. We are humbled by the support we receive every single day from the people we're able to serve, and we strive to foster a safe and beautiful city that we call home. When you need help, your firefighters are coming. We will do everything in our power, including giving our lives to save yours. Thank you.
Victoria Marshall, I live in the city. I was really mad when I came here because I was misinformed, it was my own fault, that I thought you were considering a tax for the homeless, and so all of my comments were written about that, and I emailed, but so it's my mistake. We must fund our police and our fire, we must, but there will be a referendum if a sales tax is put forth, and I doubt that any of you would be reelected. I think one of the reasons is because you just put a levy through, and people are going to say, what? We just passed a levy, now they want more? I don't think that it will work. And another reason that it won't work is no matter what you choose. To me, the utility fee, I was looking at all of them and I was thinking, this is the only one that makes sense to me. But another reason that there would be a referendum would be because of the homeless situation. People know that our police and fire resources are being used for those. So people realize that. And so they aren't going to want to have to pay for that because they didn't cause that problem. And so I don't know what the solution is, but I just know that absolutely you should not do a sales tax because there would be a referendum. And I think there would be a referendum no matter what you put through. But so yeah, it is very tough decision, but I think please consider what you can do about ordinances for the homeless before you put this forth, because that's got to happen, because people will do the referendum because they know that is why our resources are being used. So thank you very much.
Good evening, Indra Nicholas. I live in the city and have a business in the city. I first want to say I respect the police and fire, and I'm so not against more funding for you all. With that said, there are so many resources for the low income. And the wealthy or more advantaged financially don't have a problem paying even $12 a month. I am feeling the squeeze of the middle class, the working people who struggle day to day to make ends meet and with paychecks. And just because you have a business does not mean you have the money to pay. Some of that money per month for businesses is huge. I am so tired. Businesses pay more for everything. You can use the same amount of water as a residence, but a business, you're going to pay more. Electricity is more. The garbage dumpster is more. Water, I mean, you pay more for everything when you own a business. It doesn't mean you can afford it. And every tax and every fee is always more on business. So I really wish you would look at that. And then there are so many nonprofits that help people pay their water bill. I don't get help paying my water bill. So these little fees that you think mean nothing to people add up. And it's one after the other, year after year after year, till you can't even afford to live here. And so I think you should look at something else. Maybe the people that want to pay more could pay quadruple for 3 of us that can't afford to pay. Maybe that's a solution. I don't know, but it's just hard, and people are struggling. And I don't know, maybe you all aren't. And a lot of the resources are for the homeless, and we're tired too. We're tired of it too.
I shouldn't have worn a happy color. Hello, I'm Faith Mall, and as of annexation, I am a citizen of Grants Pass. The fact is, you have a decision to make. I've been on, except for you, I've been on every side of the table. I have audited in a city financial situation for 20 years. I helped issue the financial reports, the budgets. Everything complied with GFOA, accreditation, congratulations, it's very hard to reach. Wasn't able to do that when I was special assistant to the police chief and managed all of his non-sworn staff issues. It's going to be a hard decision for you. I sat here working on my scratch paper trying to figure out my next budget reduction scenario for the police department. After everything I audited on you this week that was online and it looked like it was thorough, I couldn't find anything. So yes, you're going to have to make a decision. Do you try to keep the citizens that you have here living here, as it's been addressed by our guests this evening, or do you have to try to get more businesses in here to help get more funds into the city? You have a lot of things you have to weigh. Who's more important? What's more important? But the bottom line is, in my opinion, you do have to fund more on public safety. It's a 24/7 operation. It's 3 shifts, not 1, like finance is supposed to be, not what I worked. So I really am glad I never had to sit in your seat. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mike. I live in Grants Pass. I am a financial advisor by trade, and every single family that's sitting in this audience has to manage their budget, right? And you're no different. You're no different than these people. And at the end of the day, it comes down to one major thing. At the end of the month, do you have more month than money? And evidently what I'm hearing is Grants Pass doesn't have that. What Grants Pass has got a problem is they've got more issues because they have way over budgeted whatever their resources are. And so we as families, every day we have to budget. And yet, why don't you do the same thing? Why do you have to keep coming to us for more money? Right? So in my day, in the way I do my business and my job, I work with my clients and we talk a lot about our budget, their budget, and it's no different than your budget. And what's happening is you guys have been overspending and you haven't been able to work within your own budget. So guess what? You need to tighten your belt, and perhaps you need citizens like myself to come in and maybe take a look at what you're doing. Because whatever is happening right now, it ain't working. And we are not really happy with that. Here's the other issue I have. How much resources are we spending in our community in regards to the vagrancy that's taking place every day? I know the police and fire, they want more money. But why is it that our city is engulfed in crime on a daily basis and nobody is doing anything about it? I'm about tired.
Mike, please respect the red light.
Oh, is there a red light? I see 6 seconds.
It was already beeping.
Well, I still see 6 seconds. So until that 6 seconds goes away, never mind, I'm leaving.
Thank you. Next.
Mayor, council, members of our public safety team, thanks for allowing us to have this opportunity. My name is Terry Hopkins, local resident, local business owner, and I'm also an advocate for the hospitality industry in Oregon. This opportunity tonight was special, and to the chiefs, to the men and women, I'm not surprised that our public safety department, as others dwindle out, are the ones still here listening, representing us as a community. I grew up in a family of public safety. My son is currently serving in the U.S. Coast Guard, and his dream is to come home and serve as a police officer in Grants Pass. But the decisions we're faced with tonight are huge decisions that council is choosing to take upon themselves potentially. We're talking about what a massive undertaking this is and how much it's going to take to get it done. There's not one silver bullet. We've talked about it. We know that a sales tax or a food and beverage tax, if passed at the council level, will go to a referendum. It's going to divide the citizens, the people in this room that are doing amazing things, having amazing conversations to solve a very difficult problem. Don't pass this at the council level and ask for a referendum that divides the people that you represent. Allow us to continue to work together. You're right, this has taken 20 years. We've passed the levy for 24 years in a row. We support you. We're in a big world of hurt. We need all of us to come together. We don't need 5 counselors to make the decision that thousands of people have said no to over and over on the ballot. It's not one option. It's going to take a lot. I'm here to help you. I appreciate you guys. Please listen to the people that elected you to represent us.
Good evening. My name is Mike Slotemaker. I'm a resident of Grants Pass, live just upstream from Baker Park, so have a very unique perspective of public service. In 2023 alone, we had over 20 police incidents on the 11 acres known as the Texas property owned by our HOA. We had 7 fires, including one that was very significant, got within 100 feet of our house, and it was a combination of the fire and police that were able to save it. Don't know if you realize this, we actually had ODF bring in a 20-man hand crew inside the Grants Pass city limits. That's how big it was. I have so many thoughts, but I want to say, Brian, I appreciate how you're saying you want to listen. No matter what you do, it won't be popular. I can tell you what you need to do. You need to lead. We need to be led. We have elected you for leadership. Don't kick it back to say, well, what do y'all want to do? We're just going to sit here and keep scrambling. I had privilege to go through the Citizens Police Academy this past fall. I spent 12 weeks of my time just really learning about what's going on with public service in this town. Opened my eyes. I did ride-alongs with Grants Pass PD, with private security, a sit-along with 911 dispatch, and here's the reality. The transient situation in this town has overwhelmed our public services. We're not here to talk about how to fix that. We're here to say our departments are doing more with less, and when we have an officer that says it's not even about the money anymore, oh man, that hits, because that says they're here for a purpose and they're doing a job, and it's a personal mission to them. I am in favor of whatever you need to do to lead to get this thing funded. And I'm not sitting here saying I want to spend more money, but I'm willing to spend more money. We need to go with what the professionals are telling us we need to do, and please lead. Thank you.
Mayor, City Council, Chiefs, valued people. My name is Jim Smith. I own Mount Mike's Pizza here in town on F Street. I'm not a resident, although I have restaurants in lots of parts of the state here. I appreciate this challenge that you have, right? Having operated restaurants in both areas with and without sales tax and beverage tax, it's complicated. Yeah, it is very complicated what you're trying to solve for. I can tell you, I just wanted to share with you the impact it has on employees, because it does impact every employee that's working paycheck to paycheck in these restaurants. When you add a sales tax, and I think page 5 and page 6 on your spreadsheet, your estimate, your forecasting is fantastic. It shows you what the reduction in disposable income will have on the citizens of the city. That tax burden is coming out of a wallet. That wallet is what also carries that dollar bill that ends up in a restaurant. And with fewer dollar bills available to go buy food in that restaurant, they're not going to show up. When there's fewer transactions in that restaurant, we don't need as many people washing dishes or sweeping the floor or serving a guest. It impacts on hours. Those hours impact on payroll. The $380,000 I had in payroll in this restaurant this last year will be less with the food and beverage tax. That's the real impact of some of this. Sales taxes are very small. You're at 1.5%. You can go south a few hundred miles and you'll pay a lot more than that. But you see, I've operated restaurants on border towns before, and I do see the impact, whether it's in, not Pendleton, Oregon, but it's in Eagle and Boise. Those little commutes, they make a difference. There is a sales impact in 2 restaurants with same communities, one with a sales tax, one without a sales tax. There is an impact to that, and it impacts the employees in that restaurant. I appreciate what you're doing. It's not easy. I'll just leave it one final thing. The budget has 243 FTEs. If you want to add 6, which of those 243 is more important than the 6 you're trying to add? Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
My name's Scott Swanton. I am a city resident, and I just was wondering, one, thank you for all you do, and I know we've got a shortfall going, but I also feel that we have some city property that's sitting empty, that's not being used, that possibly could be sold off to help with the deficit that we have. And I know it's not going to resolve everything, but it would be a big jump or start to that. Thanks again.
Hi, Jay Meredith, resident of the city. I'm going to try to, give you 30 minutes of comments here in 2 minutes, so I'm going to try to go pretty quick. I was the city's finance director between the years 2010 and 2020. What you might not know is that I spent a lot of my free time advocating for public safety funding solutions at Josephine County and Grants Pass. I was part of the group that put together the nonprofit organization in 2012 when the county first hit the wall. Had countless discussions about these sort of things, and unfortunately, I don't think the public is at a place where they're going to support any form of sales tax, whether that be a food and beverage tax or a general sales tax. I just don't think we're ready for that. I don't think the public is going to support it. I think if it comes forward with or without a vote, I think the public will unfortunately overturn it. We had 80% no in the food and beverage tax vote in 2005, 2006. We had 80% no in 2015. We had 80% no, close to 80% no in the last county effort. We're just not there. The public has spoken loud and clear that that's not the direction we want to go. So I don't think the city should spend any more time on that. So what should we do? What we should do is put a pencil and paper together and adjust the estimates of what the future need is. When I look at, and JC was very kind to send me some public records requests that I had sent in recently because I wanted to see more about how did we project what the future need is for the financial need. I think that the actual financial need to get back to the level of service that we all expect that we're trying to get to is actually less than what has been forecasted. I think the forecast is very conservative and appropriately so, but I think that we can do a utility fee for $12 or less without a food and beverage tax and get to where we need to be. I will send you an email with a full analysis of how we can do that over the next week. So I appreciate if you would take a look at that.
Thanks, Jay. Anybody else? All right. Thank you all so much for your patience. I know we've been here over 3 hours now, and I hope that you found this informative. You are able to email us at the email address is mayorcouncil, all smushed together, at grantspassoregon.gov. And then we will be discussing this again February 7th at our regular business meeting. The decisions haven't been made yet, but as many of you have stated, we do need to make a decision one way or another on something very, very soon here in order to move forward. So with that, how about a motion to adjourn? It is a public meeting. Go ahead, go for it, DJ.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Seconded by Vanessa, and all in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned.